Welcome, everyone, to the culmination of this day. This is the seventh segment of the day. 13 hackers are assembled around the table here in studio. There are no remote guests. We're all here in studio to talk about hacker culture.
Or maybe even fisticuffs.
Or maybe a lot of different things.
Squeegees.
A lot of people introduce Larry Pesce.
Yes.
Jeff Mann.
Yep.
Doug White. Tyler Robinson.
Hey.
April Wright. Patrick Laverty.
Present.
Trent Lowe. Bill Swearingen.
What?
Jason Albuquerque.
Here.
Lee Neely.
Absent.
Joff Thayer.
I love you.
Matt Alderman.
In the house, bitch!
I've been very much... So it's interesting. I read a book, as you've heard me talk about like 18 million times on the show.
That is interesting. You read a book?
I read a book.
I was surprised too.
He read a couple books.
But you know what's funny? I didn't...
Better at
Lots
this
and
than
lots
I
of
am.
pictures.
What's funny is I'm lying. I didn't actually read it.
It's
I
an
listened to
audiobook.
it.
It's an audiobook.
I knew better. I knew better.
Right?
He doesn't read
and,
books.
So it's been playing in my car for the past couple of months, and it spawned two segments. I mean, that's the resounding endorsement for this book, is that it was the research I was doing for security history, the roundtable we recorded earlier, and then I was like, well, all the hosts need to gather around the table and talk about a topic, and I'm like, there was so much great information in this book. I'm like, we really need to talk about hacker culture, which is something we've never sat around on a podcast and talked about on this show. I'm like, what a better opportunity than to have all these fine individuals here in studio and talk about hacker culture and not the nitty-gritty details of information security we talk about every week, but really what it means to be a hacker.
Can
And
I fucking kill that thing?
to have that opportunity with this fine group is just an honor. You are all very much hackers. Trent and Bill already exceeded my expectations for being the hackers that they are today. Trent was showing me pictures that he was posting on social media, and I'm like, it really, for me, captured when we started hanging out at early ShmooCons and then DEF Cons, right? What the hacker culture was all about. So thank you, all of you, for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to exposing our audience, whether they're seasoned listeners or just coming into the field, like really what it means to be a hacker and what the hacker culture is all about. Now, I started my journey, and I've been doing this, 20 plus years, right? And I started listening to this book, and the stories they were telling from the late 60s and the hackers at MIT, I'm like, wow, like Larry and I have done stuff like that. Trent, Bill and I have done, like we've all together like done stuff like that. And I'm like, to go back in time and realize that like, really, truly, that's where I can trace where it started. And sure, there were hackers before that we identified, but the culture, I think, was really defined largely at that time at MIT. And I'll try and tell multiple stories without giving away too much of the book, right? And I've told most of you today, right? They would write source code on paper tapes and leave it in a drawer. And anyone who wanted to replicate that function could just go into the drawer, and it was like the first underpinnings of open source. We talk about lockpicking, right, on the show. Lockpick villages have been a thing in hacker conferences for some time, and I really thought that's where it kind of stemmed from. No, the early MIT hackers, there was only one computer on campus, and if it broke when they scheduled time at 3 in the morning, they knew how to fix it, or they would figure it out, because that's what we do as hackers, right? We figure it out. They were like, well, they locked up all the parts because they're expensive. They literally got their locksmithing licenses and learned lockpicking to lockpick their way into the office, to take the parts, to go fix the computer, and then relock everything back up. And like, if nothing else embodied the hacker culture, it was stories like that.
Absolutely.
And I think this is an opportunity to share with our community what it really means to be a hacker.
So, sharing with the community, what was the book?
It was Stephen Levy. It was written in 1986. Stephen Levy, Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution. Fantastic book.
Awesome.
Written when?
1986.
Wow. Yep.
But you think
How'd
about
they get a book that old on tape?
Right.
It's on paper tape.
Somebody.
I had this tape reader in my car. It was,
8-track.
Super 8.
Good morning, Paul. I am going to read this book to you.
Right.
So instead of going down to Home Depot to pick up a guy to work at your house, you go to Borders Books and get a guy to read it to you.
There you go. That's old school, yeah.
It's available on Audible.
What was one of the amazing things to me was, we all all of us here at this table have many, many computing devices. In fact, I think earlier, Bill, Larry, myself, and Trent, we were talking about, like, we've been collecting and using computers for so long that, like, we have this problem. We have to get rid of the old stock, right? Like, eventually you got to start to purge all the computing devices we had.
Yep.
Back in that time of the late 60s, where I'll start, right, there was, like, literally one computer on campus, and there were maybe a handful of campuses and government entities that actually had computers. Now, there was the IBM mainframes, which I think were much more popular at that time. Right? We talked about the 7090 in a previous segment, but the DEC, PDP, even before that, the does anyone remember the TX0? TIC0 is what they called it. I didn't know that existed as a computing platform.
My first computer was, well, on the Commodore side, personal, but
Right.
Corporate-wise, of PDP-11.
Yeah, and so that's what really started the UNIX kind of hacking movement, right? But hacking, what I was amazed with, predates all of that, right? It goes even before the PDPs. These TIC0s, right? The reason that the MIT hackers took an interest in them, one of the reasons was they were part of the Model Railroad Club. I never realized this, right? They would take relays from pinball machines, they would put them and retrofit them into a model railroad, and that was their style of hacking. When computers came in, they basically transferred that hacker culture into computing from model railroads, which was just an amazing point in the book. And, you know, there was very much, we talked about the security maturity model, right? And I almost wanted to kind of call this out without offending anyone, but it's really hard today, right? But the culture they described were the hackers that would read and talk to people and learn any way they could. They would schedule time in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's the only time they could get on the computer. And not only that, if they couldn't get a time at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd be in the room next door. And at 3:01, if someone didn't sign up for that time, they'd jump on it and use the computer, right? And they called themselves hackers. The folks that were graduate students working on the IBM machines that didn't embody the hacker culture, and this is a fact from history, it's not me talking anyone down, right? They would call them losers, right? And I feel like there's some dynamics today, and sometimes losers would prove themselves and earn the status of hacker, right? And that was only through really, really hard work, tenacity, and really not giving up was one of the things that I took from the book. It's something that I've talked about on previous shows, right? Like when we set out on a mission to complete a project, we're not going to give up. Like what I was telling actually our intern Jack, 16, right? I'm like, you earn your stripes when you spend an entire week at least on one problem in overcoming that technical challenge. Like that's like a Boy Scout. If it was Boy Scouts, there'd be a badge for that.
Yeah,
that would be totally American.
The tenacity badge, right? But boom, put it right on your thing because tenacity was the early part of this, right? When we grew up in our era,
there was no internet. You couldn't go Google stuff, right?
You couldn't Google stuff. You couldn't go to Wikipedia and look stuff up. I mean, you just figured it out, right? It was tenaciousness, right? It was tenacity.
You figured it out so you could get on a BBS and download messages from
Exactly.
FidoNet. And then you can read more about the problem that you had. Like,
right. Remember the early days, right? So I remember Case Western Reserve was one of the first campuses, all fiber
and
connected.
To celebrate hacker culture, I have champagne. So.
Yes, we have lots of champagne.
Love you, man.
you answered Lee's request. He needs more alcohol.
To celebrate another year of Security Weekly as well.
So
we're gonna do some champagne.
in the 80s, Case Western Reserve went all fiber and connected us right in the Cleveland free net. And it was all bulletin board services back in the day. And we all had our publicly routable IP addresses in our dorm rooms. I mean, we were connected to a routable connection right from our dorm rooms with fiber. I mean, like, think about that for a second, right? I mean, you know, this was the early days of the internet and the early days of what we were doing and getting onto the bulletin boards and doing some of the stuff that we did. But the history is way before that, right? I remember '88 because I walked onto the Cases campus and had these fiber ports in my dorm room. But I mean, the whole history up to that point is just pretty astounding.
All right, I gotta chime in.
Trent, you were trying to chime in earlier.
Oh yeah, I was just saying I would say that same culture early on has kind of transformed into parenthood. At 3 a.m, that's only when like your wife is asleep or you have time to work on those projects.
And Trent, it's a great point. The hacker culture spawned out of that was we're creatures of the night, right? Mm-hmm. We work late at night. And we've talked on our business shows, right, about people that work better in the morning, people that work better at night. And I think it's really, it's a hacking opportunity, right? You're hacking your own body to either go towards your natural clock to work when you want to work and hacking your life so that you can work when you're most productive, or you're hacking your body, hopefully in a safe way without pharmaceuticals or other things, to be able to either wake up early or stay up late to accomplish your mission. And that speaks to the tenacity, right? That we want to learn new things, right? That's why security in obscurity is an ineffective mechanism, because as hackers, we'll spend, one of the great examples of this, right? Talking to a hacker who was presenting on hacking like Alexa and Google's. He's like, oh yeah, I read all kinds of books on audio text processing and audio engineering and natural language and speech. Because I was like, do you have a background in that? He's like, no, I got books and I read them because I wanted to hack this technology, right? And that was really something that I don't think we've really highlighted enough, that we will go to great lengths to learn a technology. Bill.
Yeah, Paul, I'm interested. When did you know that you were a hacker? Like, so what was that point in your life when you realized, like, what did you do? Like, what was the thing that you're like, I'm a hacker?
I loved programming and hacking on my Apple IIe when I was 7. And it was an opportunity my parents afforded me. It was fun. I told the story earlier. Like, I was at the registry updating my license and talking to. She's like, "Oh, my computer's running slow." And we got to talking, and I'm like, "I've been doing computers since I was 7." She goes, "Oh, I didn't know they had computers back then. I thought that was something they invented in the 90s, right? That's when the internet got popular, right?" Yeah. And that was the point for me where I was like, I could take this machine and do stuff with it and write commands and make it do stuff, right? And for me, it was the Apple IIe and my parents that signed me up for courses where I learned programming, and I'm like, this is awesome, right? Then as I would go to anyone's house, my friends' houses, they had IBM PCs, I'm like, what can we make it do, right? And that's when I knew I was a hacker.
Can I chime in?
Yes, please do. John.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to tell a brief story.
Oh, wait, before that, can we a toast?
Yes, let's do a toast.
Cheers to security.
To security.
2019,
Security Weekly.
fantastic year.
To job security.
Cheers.
Love y'all.
Cheers.
All right, now I'll tell my story.
Drink first.
Take a drink first, and then go.
So I realized I was built for this when I was actually 17 years old. Similar to Paul, this was actually Commodore 64 in the British English world. And
Very similar time period.
Very similar time period.
What's British?
Yeah. I grew up in Australia, of course, and my brother,
British?
my brother and I.
It's part of the empire. Come on.
It is.
Never heard of it.
My brother and I determined that we could actually rewrite the operating system of the Commodore 64 from the ground up, and we did. We learned 6502, Motorola assembly of 6510.
Was that the same one that Apple was using in the Apple One?
It was.
Yeah.
We rewrote the operating system from the ground up. We actually wrote, and I'm going to announce it right now, never been announced before, a network operating system where we could run a program on one system and have the output displayed on the other system across RS-232.
In assembly language.
No way.
In assembly language.
That can't be done.
We wrote the first network operating system right then, and we were 16. I mean, we didn't know what that was worth.
That rocks.
That was about the same time I'm playing with the Commodore 128-ish, right?
Yep.
It's in that same time period.
It's in the same time period.
Same time period for you, Paul.
Yep.
We're playing with the 64, the 128s. I had a 128 when I was a kid, and dealing with the Commodore system, I was Commodore Atari, right? And so you started to play with that stuff, and that intrigued me to the point where in school I wanted to learn programming. I wanted to learn BASIC and all the early languages.
We were working in assembly. We went straight for assembly.
But back then, there was a line in the sand between assembly and BASIC. Some people would start with
Big
BASIC.
time.
Some people start
I didn't
with
touch assembly
But it's
until
interesting.
much later in my career.
The book goes through multiple different periods and different aspects of hacking. One is online systems, which became Sierra Online. have you ever played Leisure Suit Larry?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
That was it, right? Born out of Sierra
Oh,
Online.
I thought you were talking about Tuesday.
Now, let me tell you, if you think we have a crazy culture here at Security Weekly, read about the culture at Online Systems.
Oh, that
at
was
Sierra.
nuts. It was nuts.
So, Joff, you're familiar with this, right? They hired
Yeah.
a young programmer, I forget his name, John something, that basically hacked his way to learning Atari 800? Atari 800 assembly
That's
language.
right. That's right.
And there were those individuals at 16 years old that were learning assembly, like calling up Atari going, hey, can you tell me anything? And Atari going, no, I don't want to tell you
Well, you got to
anything."
remember that Motorola actually ruled the processor world at that point, at the 8-bit processor world. But I'll finish my story really briefly, but I actually graduated from that period of my life into a world where I was interacting with a VAX 11780, Digital Equipment Corporation, TVI 912 terminal, moving to VT100s, VT220s.
Wait, VAX was VMS.
Yeah,
No, all
VMS.
VMS.
Yeah. Which,
VAX
by the
or
way,
VMS?
just a
Oh, beautiful operating system.
beautiful
it
operating
was.
system. And just a historical note, if you increment the ASCII letters VMS, what do you actually get if you increment them by 1?
How?
You get WNT, which is Windows NT. So the VAX VMS operating system actually migrated into the first Windows NT kernel, and few people actually know this.
Interesting. Because I did a lot of work when I was in nuclear power. One of the things we did was take the
I knew
VAX
this.
11780s to the 785s, and then we took the 785s and we moved them to the alphas.
Yep.
In my
Right.
career,
Right.
career
Back in
job,
the- back
one of
in
the
the
guys I
80s.
met, his name was Arnie, and he was like the ultimate VMS hacker, and told me those stories.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it just happened to like we working at the same company and meet like one of the like leaders in the community of VMS that just happened to be.
Few people- few
was
people know this,
I was
right?
working at a lottery company, and 80% of the world's lotteries were using this company's software, and they all used VMS. Jason knows
VMS.
which company I'm
the,
talking
the,
about.
the,
right?
the VMS kernel influenced the Windows NT kernel at the time significantly. I don't know what
we
money.
skipped over a whole bunch of history. DEC
We
plays a
did.
very important role. I
Yeah,
think,
they do.
in
DEC
this.
plays
Yeah.
a huge role in real-time computing systems, the ability to process real-time I/O. They were systems we used in the plants way back in the day.
So-
That DEC created. So DEC was
feed
doing industrial.
all the information back up into the control
They,
rooms back in the day.
they totally did. I'll finish my story briefly, but the thing we got into was the computer science group. This is 1983. The computer science group was competing with the electrical engineering group at that time, and we were hacking VMS. The idea was we could actually write a DCL program, which was VMS's command language, DCL, to pretend like you were logging out of the multi-user system, but really it was a credential capture system. Okay, so you'd run your program, pretend like you were logging out, and then you were just capturing the next credentials of whoever logged in, and then would you invisibly log out in the background. That was our DCL program, right? It was nothing amazing, but it was, frankly, just a straight-up fish exercise on terminals.
What I
right?
love about the hacker culture is the sharing of information, and that traces its roots back to MIT, right?
Yeah.
The paper tapes were in a drawer. They were very much collaborating. When they looked at a time-sharing based system, they hated that because they wanted to use all of the computing system's power and not share it with all of the other
Right.
users, right?
That's
and it
right.
was very much
Right.
a information should be free was built into the culture from the beginning, and that's very much the same things that we value today.
We
in our
totally
community,
value it. It's
right?
actually incredibly important that we continue to value that.
And that's
actually.
that's something we still hear today, especially like on my team when we get people joining our team into pen testing from other fields like development and programming. So many times they jump in and say, "This is so nice to join this kind of field where people are so willing to help and share information." Where I come from in programming, everybody just kind of silos themselves off. They don't want to help. They don't want to share anything.
Yeah.
And it's
I hate that.
They notice how
I totally hate
the
that.
knowledge instead of share the
Right.
knowledge, right?
It's interesting
People
how
love
the
it.
beginnings of hacker culture were very much in the software should be free, right? And I've always kind of looked at like open source separate from the hacker culture. Like there's an open source culture and a hacker culture, but the beginnings were very much the same. They're like, we should be able to write this and share ideas and share it with everyone else, and everyone else can advance that technology, right? And the awesome hacks that came out of that were they used early PDP 1 or in the pre-11 PDP computers to do things like some of the first phone phreaking. Some of the early PDP computers had a speaker. They connected that to the phone system, and they were abusing the phone system through the PDP platform. They rode in the New York subway. It was a very famous hack back in the 60s, right? They were the fastest person to ride the subway from like one side of New York to the other. The way they did that was they wrote software on the PDP, and every stop, back then, they would go into a payphone, right, and call up and go, what train should I take next? And the computer would calculate at the time where their next they got national press for that. And that was just like what we do, like a hack to just to prove we can do something, right?
Now you just use Google and figure out what the best route in.
No, right. Right.
I think that stuff came out of the. I think that stuff came out of the engineering culture of the 50s and the 40s. Because all those, I learned programming from a bunch of old school engineers, like guys in white shirts and black ties and horn rimmed glasses, and
they like were circled around the mainframe. They called those priests.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Hey, Doug, that explains a lot about you, by the way. Yeah.
But the hackers hated that
name
culture.
Of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
But there was another culture, though. There was this engineering culture that crossed over because those guys were the people who built the hardware. And that whole culture revolved around people that shared information all the time. There was no easy way for people to disseminate information, and they fully expected you to call them. I mean, I remember being like 16, 17 years old, and essentially social engineering people's office phone numbers out of other people, and then calling those people and going, "Hi, are you Sid?" And the guy going, "Yeah, I'm Sid. Who is this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, Ray told me to call you." And I had this question about this assembly line, like I don't know what it does. And a lot of these guys were really excited to share information, and they actually took time out of their day to talk to me, and they didn't go, "Hey, get bent, loser." They actually took time and explained it. A couple of times people actually sent me stuff in the snail mail. I got envelopes from these like weird guys in labs who I had called. And they sent me like pieces of code or JCL or some little chunk of something that actually helped me solve a problem. And I thought that was like the coolest thing I had ever seen, because some person who I thought as this teenage kid was a brilliant person. Maybe they weren't, but they seemed that way to me. They were a priest. They were this person up on high, and they took their time to mail me like a sheet of paper with some stuff written on it. Try this and see if it works. And that was like really, really cool, and it introduced me to this idea of helping other people, and that when people call me and ask things, that maybe I ought to take the time to do that. I don't always do that because I'm a lot more capricious than those guys were, but I try to do that. So when people ask those kind of questions, and I think that was some of that early hacker culture came out of that kind of concept, because that was where the stuff was coming. It was like the tapes in the drawer.
Yeah.
This was stuff where people had folders, and that folder had instructions on it, and you went and got it, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, go down there, there's a filing cabinet, there's a folder in there, it says Steve on it." And you go pull the folder that says Steve, and you go, "Oh my God, this is how you actually set up the tape drive." Why they wrote this down? Because there was no manual, there was no Google, there was no, and that was how you did it. And they just sort of expected it. I think that drove a lot of early hacker culture, because it created that idea that you have to go around the system, because the system is always going to tell you no. That was the first lesson I ever learned in technology, was the system is always going to tell you no.
So you use OSINT techniques to really navigate your way through getting the information you needed to figure out how did this stuff work, in order to figure out, well, what can I do now that I have that data?
The first thing I would ever call any kind of a hack that I ever did was I wanted this manual. And it was an IBM manual, and I didn't know that much about the IBM machines. I had always worked on PDP-11 and DEC 10. It was all PDP-10 and PDP-11 stuff. And I wanted this manual so bad, and I didn't know how to get it. And this guy told me that this group had these manuals because they used that system. And I got my dad to take me there. and we went on a little tour of this place. And while they were all talking about all the bullshit, I sort of ducked out of the group and went over to this desk and went, "Do you have this manual?" And this guy went, "Yeah, I think so." And he opened this cabinet and he was like, "Yeah, here it is. What do you want with it?" And I was like, "I'm supposed to take you to this guy named Ray down the hall." and he went, "Yeah, okay.
Physical
Just tell him to make sure
You didn't just take pictures of it with your cell phone?
I think that's one of the most important things.
And I said, "I'll bring it back later."
Bill,
I still
hold on,
have
wait.
it though. I still have it in my basement.
So you haven't brought it back later.
I think that's one of the most important things about hacker culture that we can talk about. So the thing that I find really interesting is, I'm sure all of you in your careers, in your life, you find people that are asking you, how do I hack, right? How do I become a hacker? And how do you explain that to someone?
Right.
Right? How do you explain to someone, like you don't become like a hacker, right? You are or you are not, right? Because the challenge that's given to you, you find a solution. I'll help you. And actually, I love that I'm going to bring up Jack again. Like, I was just having a great conversation with Jack outside. Like, it's not my job to explain to you how to do it. It's my job as a mentor or whatever to help you if you're doing it, right? So
to guide you.
To guide, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
If you need that manual, go find the manual.
Yeah.
My job's not to give
that's
it
right.
to you. Go get it.
And to be honest with you, when people ask questions like that, I tell them it's about attitude and aptitude,
That's
right?
exactly right.
You have to have a level of intellectual curiosity, and by the way, you have to have some fucking grit.
That's right.
And the grit is go get it. Have
get it.
perseverance. Go out there and find it.
When
Right.
I started my first job when I was still in college, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the hacker culture. If I was to ask someone a question, a technical question, I had to prove to them that I did my homework.
That's
That I didn't
Of course, yeah.
they didn't want me spending like days or weeks on a problem because that was detrimental to the business, right? But did you get to a certain point where you can prove to me that you're able to ask that question, right? And oftentimes in the early times of the job, they would turn me away. They're like, nope, go do some more research, earn your stripes to be able to ask that
That's exactly
question, right?
Yeah.
And that was such. I was blessed to have that valuable lesson early in my career, and I don't want us to lose sight of that today, right?
Like, you take a look at the holiday hack challenge that's going on, and I don't know if you guys are playing that, but it's amazing this year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Amazing. And so you take a look at someone with player. Do you, hackers here at the table, you guys hackers, do you want someone to tell you how to do it?
No.
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 You might. I might want somebody after a little while to point a little direction.
That's exactly right.
Right.
But
Go this way and not
Right.
that
That's exactly
way.
right.
The biggest
You
problem
missed
I'm seeing,
this.
though, is that
You wanna
we're living
discover.
in this instant gratification society.
exactly
Yes.
And kids coming out of school, they want the answer like this,
That's
right?
exactly right.
And
Can I
I,
just
and I
Google the
throw- I
answer?
honestly, I throw the old school Marine Corps thing that I got thrown at me, and it's NILF. Nothing in life is free.
That's
right.
right.
Nothing in life is free. Show me that you put a little bit of.
Joe, not only do they want the answer, they want a fucking medal to go along with
Cheers,
it.
man.
You know,
they want a trophy for participation.
And there's no critical thinking outside of that as well. Like, I
Right.
think Google, they want everyone, I'm going to follow the instructions that this guy did rather than hack
hey,
around
why,
it.
why does
The
this
hacker
young guy
culture.
sound like an old guy?
the
What-
hacker
what's
culture
going on?
is,
What's this
I want
young kid
I want
anyway?
the problem.
I
the
was-
hacker culture is give me the
Well,
problem.
one of the
Yeah,
old
right.
engineers that I learned to code from, I went in and asked a question, and he didn't tell me the answer. He took a copy. I don't know. None of you may know what this is. He took a copy of the CRC. Do you know what the CRC is?
Yeah.
The Chemical Rubber Company Manual. They issued one every year.
I thought it
and
was
I thought it was cyclic redundancy.
redundancy check.
It's the
Yeah.
Chemical Rubber Company Manual, and it was a book that was published every year.
I'm
And
gonna
it
need
had
to
all these logarithms and formulas and any kind of useful thing that an engineer might need to know. And every engineer on Earth subscribed to this thing, and they got a copy of it every year. I don't know why, because it never hardly ever changed. But the guy just took that, this big, thick book, and he threw it on the table, and he goes, "There you go, the answer's in there." And I was like, what the hell
look
is
at
this?
us. Yeah, go look
Oh
it
my
up.
God! And it's just like
RTFM.
tables and tables and tables and tables. Like, I have no idea what to do. But the expectation was not that I'm going to then go, well, what do I do with it? It was I was going to take it back, and I'm going to study it, and I'm going to try to figure out what to do, and I'm going to spend some time working on it. And when I've done that, if I really don't understand it, and I come back and I go, how do I use this table of logarithms effectively? Here's the code I wrote,
right.
and I'm not sure it's correct. Then the guy would look at it and go, no, it's not correct.
So-
and that taught you to be tenacious. It taught you to be resilient.
Yeah, well, it taught you to go do your homework.
Right.
Yep.
That's the thing.
But it's also, but I think a better word for that is persistence.
Yeah. Well,
sure.
There is
Yeah.
certainly an aspect of persistence that is built into our hacker culture.
And
Lee,
I
hold on, Lee.
can think of two examples. I mean, back in the 70s when I was in high school, we had a Data General Nova 210 mini computer running timeshare basic, and that's where I learned a bunch of hacking, including we wrote in multi-user basic your DCL script.
My
where it
DCL
created the
script
fake shell. We created all
take
fake
credits.
versions of all the commands that would do that would screw with you.
Beautiful.
And the trick was not to be detected by our classmates. But what I was going to mention is that during the summer, before the summer break, one of the teachers at the school where the computer lived decided to teach a machine language class, not assembly, machine language. I crashed the class. I found out about it and I crashed it. It was supposed to be by invitation only. I completed the session anyway. I mean, we were having to punch our code at KSR 33s onto punch paper tape and then read them in with the high-speed paper tape reader. But
high-speed.
Oh yeah.
But also, there's an aspect to that, right, that is really one of the huge underpinnings of hacker culture, and that is solve a problem at any cost.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Right?
I want to jump
At
in.
any
I
cost.
want to
It
jump
comes
in
back to
this space.
persistence.
Hold on, Bill.
I want to tell you something. So that I learned this phrase from someone that I respect 100%, Trent Lowe, and he phrased, "There's no such thing as cheating and hacking."
Yeah.
Right? There's no
There's a
such
goal.
thing as
No.
cheating and hacking. Right? If like the goal is accomplish the task.
Yeah.
Right? And whatever it takes to get there. Right?
Cheat
It
to
could
win.
just be like we could have shirts that say "I cheated your computer" instead of "I hacked your computer."
Yeah, right.
So that's back to that old engineering, though, because as old engineers, it was about accomplishing a purpose.
Right.
It was like, I've got to make this survive. I've got to make this burn. I've got to make this explode, or whatever it was you needed to do. It didn't matter how you did it, and a lot of them
was
did
about
not
the
know what they
outcome.
were
Yeah, it was
doing.
about the outcome.
No,
So they just had to make it work.
You
And-
know what's interesting? Early MIT hackers did something along these lines. You're next, Larry. In that they created on early PDB computers a robotic arm that could catch a ball, right?
Right.
And it was a hack because, like, however they got there, the goal, right? Make this arm catch a ball. Doesn't matter how you get there,
yeah, right.
what tape you pull from the drawer, and how you put it together.
Right, don't care.
We made an arm
Yep.
catch. Now they also tried to make it play ping pong. Turns out that was like
Whoa, that's
the result of a lot of paddling.
Way too advanced.
That's the advanced
right?
class.
I mean, we got there not too far after that, right? But yeah, Larry.
I think this very much comes to the Bill's comment about you can't learn to be a hacker, you just are. And I think about, where I've come from and what sort of instilled the stuff into me was very much that, I grew up, my dad was an electrical engineer, my mom was a crafter, my grandfather on one side was an inventor. He invented medical stuff, which are still in use today and save hundreds of thousands of lives
Which
all
doesn't
over the world.
surprise me in any capacity.
And
Larry.
my other grandfather was a carpenter. And every time I spent time with my grandparents, it was, let's go do something. And my carpenter grandfather said, well, what do you want to build today? And I want to build a birdhouse. Well, how would you do that? And
I
it
think
was
that's where-
and it was instilling that critical thinking of,
Right.
I don't know what the tools are. I don't know what's available to me. Now, he's posed the question to me, how would you do it? And I don't know what's available to me. What do I have? What kind of tools can I use?
But I think
And-
but that's where we lost the term hacker in some sense, that hackers are meant to destroy things. What Larry's describing is, and what we're describing is, hackers are building things.
And
Right.
remember,
We're
one thing about Larry's comment, it's okay to build a bad one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was an important concept there. It did not have to be perfect
Right.
birdhouse. It could be a really shitty birdhouse.
Because you know what? Because you took the lessons you learned from the first birdhouse and you built a second one and a third one and a
Yep.
fourth one.
Right.
And next thing you know, you're building birdhouses with inlaid
Right.
wood
Or
and
who even cares? Man? You
Yeah.
build a birdhouse, man. Like it's
Yeah,
Who even cares?
Yeah. And who cares? Because birds were going to shit in it anyways. But it was something that
So
you
then you
created
built
and
the
you were proud of.
self-cleaning birdhouse.
Things they eat and they shit, right?
Right.
So,
But it was beautiful.
So then you built the
beautiful,
birdhouse, the
but
birds couldn't go
parallel
inside
to
it.
that is-
They fly too.
They do, but
They lay eggs.
On your windshield.
And sometimes they fly and shit at the same time.
to your point, right, Larry, is my dad and my grandparents were farmers, right? you
Hell
learned
yeah.
how to just do shit.
Yeah,
Literally.
bushcraft.
You
literally.
owned. You had to manage the entire environment, right?
In overalls, mind you.
Yes, in overalls, and maybe one of the overalls
Was flipped over, yeah, yeah.
I got pictures
And
of
maybe
me in
a
that.
T-shirt.
So
Oh, I don't want to. No,
That used to be your
no.
profile pic.
I'm out. That's it.
that's it.
I'm in. I'm in. I'm in.
But what I learned as a kid was how to build stuff, how to do things, right?
And
to your
and you
point,
didn't know how to
right?
do it. You just did it, and if it worked, it worked.
Right.
And if it didn't, you try it again.
It
you
was
do it
out of
over and
necessity,
over
though,
and
too.
over
It was out of
again.
necessity.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was out of necessity in the farmer
but
world,
Tyler,
right?
but Tyler
Because-
brings up a good point, especially in the early days of computing.
That's when the
it was out
convergence
of
happened.
necessity.
How do you access a network? Growing up in Idaho, really, really poor, and not a lot of computers or internet. How do you get to the internet? Phones. How do you call? You have a problem. I need to be able to call girls. I don't have a lot of money. I'm gonna freak.
Listen.
I figured out how to use a payphone to get free calls.
Tyler
or to
and
get
I-
money.
Absolutely.
Look.
So you have a problem, you solve it, you have the tenacity to figure it out of necessity. We all have things, and can we do it cheaply? Like a lot of us, the early days, people, we couldn't have these manuals. We didn't have big corporations that provided this information or
We
the
didn't have
hardware.
1 gig fiber
So how do
pulled to our
how do
house.
we
Yeah.
how do we
You
make
too.
these
You
these
didn't?
devices,
Yep.
these hardware devices, put them all together to get a little bit of computing power and build it all
Yep.
ourselves?
Same scenario, Tyler. When I was starting to do dial-up BBSs, all the good BBSs were in Boston.
Yep.
And they were long-distance calls. In the first month in the 80s, I had a $680 phone bill. Like that's a lot of money for a kid in the 80s that I had to work off. And I had to find a way to get cheaper calls.
Can
And
I-
I figured out if I went to the apartment complex and I had the certain nut driver, I could open the phone box and I could punch my line from the house down to somebody else's. Crawl out my window at 3 o'clock in the morning and go do that, and then switch it back before.
But in case I just had 3 gig fiber connections to the
no.
BBS.
Wait, Doug. I want to ask a question then. So I mean, a lot of us were driven to this. Just the farmers are a good example.
Yeah.
They were the farmers didn't want to do what they did, right? I mean, they would have much rather had Google and said, "What seed should I plant?" And that would have been a much easier life. And
It is
most
now,
of us,
by the way.
No,
And their wife would have
Hang
said
on.
your seeds.
yeah. So I wanted to call my girlfriend. It was a long distance call, and I learned some freaking techniques for that very reason, because she didn't live that far away, but it was a long distance call. If I called her at night, it was whatever it cost a minute to talk.
5 cents a minute.
But today, those are not necessarily the circumstances that surround kids that are in high school. So the question I wanted to ask everyone was, how do we teach people these same skills today when it's kind of stupid to say, well, why don't you handicap yourself? Don't use the internet, solve this problem. When you can use the internet to solve it. So how do we teach people today? Or maybe it's a different methodology.
Have them solve internet problems.
If Joff.
Related to the question that you're posing, not only how do we motivate a generation where everything is available to them in the form of search engines and various apps and technology, but also Paul was just starting to go down this road of, when did hacker become a negative connotation, and what's driving that, and how do we turn that back around to the romantic learning?
We lost the term.
We solved the problem.
Scientific hooligans.
So I pose those two questions, and I hear what Doug is saying, but I really feel badly on the romantic connotations of hacker being lost, because we need to recover that.
Yeah.
I blame Angelina Jolie.
Wait, but hold on, Bill.
good.
I feel like we've lost the term.
I don't think so. I feel like, so I have I have younger kids. They're 10 years old, and when I hear them say hacker, it's in a very positive term, right? So
I think we're back on an upswing.
I
think we're on an upswing. I think we went through a period of time that it was bad,
fair enough.
but I think we're on an upswing.
I think with hackathons, that's starting to help a little bit.
I love
again,
that April's chiming in.
It's the positive aspects of what the hacker community did in the early days.
Yeah.
Kind of swinging back into a positive aspect of what hackers can do for the future.
Yeah.
And how do we better protect our environments? And we see lots of programs starting to actually embrace the hacker community. We talked about this in the last segment with the Cyber Patriot program, right? In teaching young kids on the values of cybersecurity, hacking, understanding how to do things. I think that's a positive swing, but I think the way we learned it as kids is different than the way our kids learn it today.
So I agree with that.
Hold on, wait. Let's go back. Let's go back in the day.
Yeah, let's
to
take
when we
take
talk
that.
about hackers, right? They weren't all good. If you look in the history of Captain Crunch, right, and the book that I read from Stephen Levy, right, goes into a lot of Captain Crunch's life, right, John Draper, and he was convicted of crimes, like he was.
But you got to
also a
disconnect.
hacker,
You got
right?
to disconnect that from his hacks.
We
right?
need to- we need to
you have
distinguish.
Exactly. He did some hacks that were very ethical, but he also did some ones that were unethical. But the point is, in the early days, there were good hackers and hackers that got off the ethical path, right?
It's a
we're in the same boat right now.
And exactly. So let's not let that lose the term, because it's always been the case that people hack for good with good ethical intent. Again,
We need to
goes back to
distinguish.
MIT. I'm going to break into. I mean, they would literally break into their professors' offices, not to just steal parts, but like. They would go
steal
sleep.
test exams
No, but they
and-
would no. They would not. They would go in and they would sleep. Like they were up for like 24 hours straight, and they would like literally climb over the ceiling, right? Because it was like I can picture like a drop ceiling in an office.
Right.
And the professor would come in the morning, and there'd be a hacker sleeping on his couch, and he was like, I embraced that as part of the hacker culture because they weren't doing any harm. They were just up learning and sleeping in my office. And I mean, he would kick him out when he got in, like, dude, time to like go back to your room and you know, go sleep more or do whatever you need to do, right?
See, my hacker culture back then was I took just detailed notes. In the fraternity house where I went I was a fucking nerd. I kid you not.
Nerd in a frat house?
I probably still am. But I mean,
I like revenge the nerds.
I documented every class. In for years, people would just use my notes to go like past classes because they could, because I took such great fucking notes. And I mean, that was part of that, right? In that because I could document aspects of what I was learning and pass that on to generations. I mean, if you looked at the exams that were done year after year after year in college, they were basically 75-80% of the same material every single year.
Memorization.
Every single year, right? And so for years, my notes were available to all my fraternity brothers to be able to take my notes that I did. They didn't have to do the work, and they could get 80+% of the way through.
I want to go back to a point, because there's another aspect of the book that I think was really pivotal for me in understanding hacker culture, which is interesting because I've been doing it all of my life and for 20 years professionally, right? But they go back to the student sleeping in the professor's office, right? At some juncture, the MIT administration said, you need to stop the hackers from breaking into things because we don't have any security. And no matter what lock or safe they would put in place for the offices and the safes that stored the computer parts, the hackers would just go get their locksmithing license in Massachusetts, right? They would learn, they would study, no matter what safeguard, no matter what type of, they would change the locks to the highest security locks at the time. And the hackers would, the professors would walk in and be like, damn it, they got in again. And what the agreement they had, which I think is just unbelievable, is they would tell the administration, no, we're secure. And then the professors would go back to the students and say, look, I know you're going to get around whatever I put in, but like, just don't tell anyone. Like, it's cool because I know you're not doing any harm. totally cool, but like give the illusion of security to the administration, and you can still hack it.
But Paul, we have to call a spade, right? They were doing it. It's all about the intent.
Harm.
Yeah.
It's about the intent, right?
We need to
The intent was
distinguish.
for them to learn. The intent was for them to gain knowledge. Why are you going to have leadership within the university say, no, I don't want them learning more, right?
Right.
It's not, though.
Well, I mean,
Because
but then there's the criminality of it, and that's the bad side,
We've
right?
all
right?
we've all done
Malicious,
things
exactly.
that were criminal.
So criminal
Speak for yourself.
I'm a Trent. Speak for yourself. I'm never.
In my office,
Never.
in my dorm room.
I mean, statute of limitations. Is
Exactly.
good.
But I think that's what when the media says hacker, which is really what the problem is. It's not. I mean, they are the ones driving the H word being
narrative.
bad, right?
They're driving the narrative, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a logic statement. Like, not all hackers are criminals. Not all criminals are hackers. Some hackers are criminals.
So as a community, though, we need to distinguish that.
All thumbs are fingers, not all fingers are thumbs.
But I think it depends on your perspective, right? Because there were those at MIT that were like, I know I'm not going to keep you out. It's cool. I know your intent is okay. However,
Now I know MIT was listed on the top of the engineering curriculum.
The person in the operations and plant maintenance who had all of the tools, which at 3 a.m, shit, I don't have a screwdriver handy. They would break into the mechanical person's toolbox and room and office and borrow a screwdriver, go use the screwdriver and put it back. Now that particular person, and there's a whole like story in the book about how the interactions with this person, that plant maintenance person hated the hackers, hated the hacker culture because they're like, you're taking my stuff. And
they felt violated.
There was a whole debate on wearing it out, and they would get in these huge debates.
that's
the funny part is, one time, one of the hackers stole a screwdriver, and by accident, they created an arc in the electrical system in the computer and literally melted the computer. And they were in a whole debate with the plant operations manager that, like, tools don't wear out. He was like, tools don't wear out if you use them properly. And the hackers were like, tools do wear out. The melted screwdriver was put back with a note that said, this one wore out.
Wait, that
help the situation.
That's a lot different than stealing $800 worth of long distance.
Right.
Like that's
Very true.
I mean,
Inject another analogy then. So if you go back in the history of medicine, and here's a book you can listen to.
I listen to all my books. There's
a book called The Ghost Map, and they were talking about cholera. And if you go back in the history of medicine, there were a lot of doctors who did things that are today would be considered incredibly unethical because nobody really knew what the rules were.
Like bloodletting?
And, well, I mean, the guy that invented the first even remotely close to something that might help you survive cholera was this crazy Italian doctor who was injecting cholera patients with various substances to see what would happen because they were going to die anyway. Now, a lot of people thought this was a horrific thing to do, but he was just injecting people with things like, oil, alcohol, and, they'd die, and he'd go, oh, that didn't work. Yeah, and then one day he injects this guy with seawater, and the guy survived.
Ruh-roh.
And they went, oh, wow, seawater may help you survive because it kept his blood volume up and it didn't kill him. And I think hacking was a lot like that to me because you saw those early days. People didn't really know exactly what the rules were. Right. Morris didn't necessarily say, I'm going to destroy the world. He said, I'm interested in this little algorithm. I'm going to see what happens. And he did it. Well, maybe he was a little far on the other side of that ethical coin, and he got in some trouble for that. And I think...
Well, the first violation of the CFAA to define trouble.
So but I think over time what happens is as this industry has grown, we've seen this industry go from a bunch of weird programmers and network engineers and all kinds of strange things with people just trying stuff.
Who's to say we're not still like weird programmers?
We are.
I think we are. I think we are.
We are, but now...
Who are you calling normal?
Have they been paying attention for the last 4 hours?
There's another whole realm of HR and corporate and all these kind of things that is normalized and is starting to normalize this profession into a thing rather than this very weird little niche of people doing things. It's becoming an actual profession.
So my comment to that is, can you imagine everyone around this table putting yourself and being a 16-year-old in today, right?
Oh my
You've
God.
got CTFs. You've got people that are training. You've got Google, right? We have the capabilities.
Yeah, but it's more fun to ring someone's phone at 3 a.m. at ShmooCon.
I agree.
And wake them up.
I agree. But when we take it back to the
not that that's happened
Never.
Right.
before.
Never.
No.
Never. I don't know.
We
what
have
you're
a
talking
friend.
about. Right. But imagine like right now when you start talking about how can the youth how do we like train, how do we teach, how do we build? It's CTFs, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, that's how you get a
Or it's
problem.
holiday hack challenge,
No,
right?
No.
It's not.
The
Hold
previous
on, wait.
segment,
No, hold on.
right?
It's not like that one time at ShmooCon where you guys had a suite. How did that happen?
That's
not talking about
That's teaching them. That's not inspiring them.
Yeah,
If you want to inspire,
That's a good point.
Inspire them.
well,
Go
but
for
if
it,
you
April.
want to
Go.
If you
inspire,
would inspire them to
Come on.
really engage in our environment, in our.
they don't care about our environment.
Yeah, no,
But
they-
you know what they care
April has
about?
to say.
The environment.
Yeah,
They
and-
care about the world. They
so
care
you-
about
so you know what?
saving the world.
Yeah, so you know what?
Problems, solving problems.
You don't,
Yeah, but
you,
if
you don't
you
introduce them
That's
to a
it.
CTF.
Holiday hack challenge and CTF.
Yeah, no.
To really
No.
embrace
That's
them
not
to
that's not
that
changing
culture.
the world.
You don't introduce them to a CTF. Life is a CTF.
Well, hold on.
Right.
Hold on. Well, I want to go back.
April.
You made a comment on an earlier panel to speak to, like, we create these, they're artificial CTFs, right?
Right.
The folks have to have the aptitude and motivation to go do them. In the early days of computing, did you have an Altair computer?
I didn't. Well, I had friends with the S100 bus computers.
Yeah.
And
Whereas the bus on the Altair, right?
And so.
But that was, I had to hack. I had to write my own operating system. I had to write my own software.
Yeah.
It was programmed into the computer, not with a keyboard, right? With dip switches on the front of the machine.
You were entering in Octal.
in Octal on dip switches, not a keyboard, right?
Right.
But
So
times have changed.
that was forcing people
Yeah.
to really become hackers. How do we
But Paul, come on,
recreate that environment?
Times have changed. Like times have changed. Like so, the new times is like so. Why do we have CTFs? And you know, when you talk about inspiration, those kind of things, and you know, like we try and game, we you know, like the gaming aspect, those kind of things. But when you think about a CTF, what are the skills that we're training? Right?
So-
That we're giving them problems. We're giving challenges. We're giving and the ones that are hackers will
rise to the top.
I think you're thinking too narrowly.
It's like the cream,
I don't-
right?
I would like to.
I think you're too narrow.
I would say that. Yeah.
So this was a
But no,
place.
I want to hear. Like,
So-
why am I thinking too narrowly?
I'm thinking too narrow. Well,
Lee,
okay.
Lee.
Hold on, Lee has the floor.
So we're dancing all around this. The hacker mindset is not just about computers. It's about taking something from A to B.
Yes.
I mean, when I was a
Every
little
day.
kid,
Every day.
my uncle brought me from Japan this beautiful Chinese kite, and we flew it. It was wonderful. I got up in the morning. I'm saying, that looks like a bow and arrow, and I made it into a bow and arrow. Okay. That was, and of course, there was a bunch
Using
of disappointment.
something other for its intended use,
Purpose,
right? It's
being
something we haven't
creative.
covered yet, right?
Or we talk about when I in the early '90s, I worked in a program that was part of the Star Wars stuff, which was Reagan's defense.
Reagan's
and my
thing, yeah.
point is not
like
what
not
we're
the
working
movie,
with.
like,
No. Sorry, Paul. Build a shield.
Reality shit, not
Space
And
Force.
but
the
fundamentally,
real stuff that was fake.
Space Force.
well, okay, so don't go to the fake stuff. What I'm saying is this
Space Force
team
was
of
developed.
scientists and engineers were doing something they'd been flat out told could not frickin' be done. They were doing things with cameras and computers that we didn't have yet, okay? Yet they were figuring the frick out, and occasionally they come up with a new challenge. How did I know there was a new challenge? I was a system administrator. When I see cases of Jolt Cola and bedrolls coming into work, I knew that somebody had a new deadline.
Because you were observant.
Hold on, Trent.
But anyway, I'm just saying it's a lot.
You mentioned that they have a point where they want to get something, and now I think the culture is when you buy a device, there's all this built-in security. We didn't have that when we were like we just had. Well, I'm going to put some crap in this field, and then boom, I can do something. But with my kids, I can see I have like firewalls, I have timers I can put on my iPad, and my son, I put a timer one night. I'm like, you can play your iPad for 10 minutes. It's like 11, 12 o'clock at night. He's still playing it. And the timer's on. What he had done is he had hit the center button in the iPad so many times, it locked up, but he could still watch YouTube that he was in. And he sat there. So to me, the hacker culture is.
That doesn't surprise me. That's your side.
But to me, the culture was always built from like you can't do something, or you're not allowed, or stop doing this. Is that drive?
This is not
This
is not a technology
opposite
problem.
of the hacker. Sorry, opposite of hacker culture is copy protection, right?
Right.
Video games as an example.
Right. So
right?
this
you
is
can't do this
again. This is not a technical problem. I think about going out to the bus with my 6-year-old the other day, and it's been cold here in New England and icy, and she walks up to the bus shelter that we have out by the street, and it's cold out, and she opens the door and it doesn't open because there's ice that has come off the roof and is on the ground, and the ice is preventing the door from open. She's like, "Daddy, can you open this?" I'm like, "No, you have to fix the problem."
Okay.
So she's like, okay. She thinks about it for a second. She walks around the corner to my workshop, opens the garage door with the code, goes in, turns the lights on, and looks around for a minute. And she walks into the back of the shop, and she grabs a hammer. She comes out, and she starts smashing the ice with a hammer. I'm like, I didn't prompt her to do this. Like, how do you solve the problem? There's something blocking entry into something you want. Find a solution to the problem.
The unfortunate part about today's society, though, is that you're the minority as a parent.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
But that's the problem. You are the minority as a parent. You're actually teaching your child to think for themselves. And most parents these days are just like, I'm frustrated. I want that freaking door open. I'm going to kick it open. Get in there, kid.
And that's
the crappy part about the way kids are growing up today.
Jason.
But that just doesn't teach
one
you
of the stories I like to tell is
That's it.
My 16-year-old daughter figured out how to hack my Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
For your reason, right? Is we had time controls in the Wi-Fi that said, no, after like certain amount of time, you can't get on the internet anymore. She figured out, she engineered how to hack my Wi-Fi to pop the Wi-Fi and get her credentials to do that, right? And so, to your point is, kids can learn how to circumvent controls in our environment.
Yes.
And that's a hacker mindset because
Challenge the process.
I've
Challenge it
Daddy
all.
says at 9 p.m. I'm done. The Wi-Fi shuts you off. And they're going to find a way around it, right?
Not all of them.
So she did. But she did. She didn't know how to do it herself, by the way. She went to friends in the high school and said, how do I get around this, right? And she went around and she popped my Wi-Fi. I'm like, holy cow, how did you do that, kid, right? But that's what the kids do. Right. If you give them the persistence.
That's not what all of them do. That's what some of them do.
Hold on, wait. Time out. Jeff.
I have not spoken yet. I am going to speak for a moment.
Oh, God.
PCI.
I'm feeling the drink coming on. I'm feeling the drink coming on, people. I'm feeling the drink coming on.
You're ready.
I'm feeling a drink.
I need to fill up.
I'm empty. Where's the
fill up.
champagne?
I'm not going there.
I will drink anyway. What the hell?
You know,
Nothing but love, Jeff.
this session started with
PCI.
It didn't, but we're going to go there.
this session started with Paul being asked, "When did you first know you were
Paul
a hacker?"
being an ass. What?
And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I don't remember. I mean, when I knew I was a hacker was relatively recently, but then I look back on my life.
That's a great point, Jeff.
And
yes.
I'm like, oh,
You didn't know at the time.
that was the hacker mentality. That was the hacker mentality. That was the hacker mentality. I mean, when I was a kid, and we had these things called telephones that were like connected to the wall with wires, and it was a handset.
No.
I learned at some. Well, we had push buttons.
What?
But
No, I had a rotary.
I didn't get the rotary until I went to NSA, but that's another story. But I learned at an early age that if you unscrewed the mouthpiece, you could pop out the little whatever the thing
the
was,
microphone,
the microphone,
Right.
remove it, screw it back on, and I could listen to everybody else's phone calls, which I used to do when they were, especially when they were talking about me. And you know, and I don't know what my earliest memory of being a hacker was, but I'm sitting here, listening to all the conversation. My first thought is, full confession, I don't touch technology anymore. I walked away from this 15 years ago, but I still consider myself a hacker. I'm not a computer hacker.
Totally valid.
But I'm still a hacker.
Yes.
Still valid.
So my
Lee gave the example of a kite.
Right.
Yeah. One of the questions that I've been thinking as I've been listening to the conversation, we talked a little bit about the term hacker being co-opted, and it has negative connotations. And we've talked about how being a hacker has a lot to do with
getting to point A to point B, solving a problem. For me, I describe it more of, don't tell me I can't do something. I'm going to figure out a way to do it. So I have a question for the group. When did the term hacking become associated with security? When and how?
That's a good question.
It's interesting. I'm not sure when it became associated with security, but I think one of the other aspects of hacking is freedom, right? Not just it sounds,
No,
philosophical,
that's true. That's
right?
very true.
But it's not just freedom, but in multiple perspectives, right? Freedom from restrictions put upon us by whoever. Freedom of when
Which
I
is also
figure
called
out
anarchy. But go ahead.
Sure, but freedom from when I figure out how to hack something, I share that with other people, right? And I think that's a huge. I don't want to have the discussion without having the hacking is freedom kind of conversation, right?
Well, Larry said you're born a hacker, and I agree with that. It's a mindset, it's a mentality.
I wouldn't say you were born, but you might have been educated early on.
Well,
about
I think
critical
it's
thinking.
something and maybe it's something that we don't call hacking, but it's something else.
Curiosity.
Doug asked, how do you teach that to people? We talked about the CTFs, and some people get it, some people don't. I don't know that you can teach hacking. You can't teach the mindset. You can't teach that.
You can coach the mindset, but
you can coach it.
Encourage it. Tyler's like squirming.
Tyler's like going to pee himself.
Do it.
Come on, Tyler. And by the way, that whatever you're wearing is
that suit.
It is
awesome.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Do not take it off. There's not enough towels.
Take it off. But you gotta look like Larry and like this.
Hold on.
Chest.
I don't want to miss Jeff's comment. There is not enough towels.
There's not enough towels, and it's beautiful, man.
Save us, Tyler.
Where I was going.
Save us.
So you can definitely the ability to inspire. So I have young kids too. So to inspire this next generation, it's not necessarily that mindset. You're not necessarily having to teach that, or you're not born with it. You coach that, but we do this, and I think what we have to do as the old generation trying to mentor that is provide those problems that they must solve. We must ask questions and tell them how are you going to solve this? We will say that you can't have a free internet if you don't figure out how to do that. You're not going to have access to data or information or your YouTube if we don't figure out passwords. Like, how are we inspiring and asking those critical thinking questions to those next generation and proposing the controls and problems?
April's
Hold on, man.
She's desperate.
Time out. April's squirming in the seat too.
She's squirming.
I came up with a theory since we've been sitting here.
Awesome.
It's a grand theory. So it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy
of need.
Hierarchy.
So at one point we had to find information. Now we have information. Now we've moved up.
Right.
So we keep moving up as things become more available. And
Yes.
well, the situation has changed for the people today versus when we first had the internet, and
there was no information.
So we have to
before the
consider that everything is completely different now.
Right.
So it's not, we shouldn't be like taking away the internet from them and telling them to solve problems. We should be allowing them to use
to solve different problems. To solve
problems in a different way.
But potentially a better way, right?
Because when I grew up, I didn't think of myself as a hacker at all, right? It wasn't something instinctively rooted in my DNA, right? What I was curious about...
But it was, you didn't realize that.
Yeah. The term
because, hold on, because knowing you, right, you solve a problem at all costs, like tenacious, right? That's part of the hack. And I think a lot of us fall in that category. We didn't know we were hackers.
You just didn't brand yourself. You didn't brand yourself that way.
Matt, same. I didn't know I was a hacker. I had a problem. I just wanted to look at porn. And I had to find a way to do it.
But this is where community comes in.
So fine.
Right.
But
100%.
When
you need to look at
we
porn.
didn't think about... We wanted to be a hacker, right?
There wasn't a thing. There wasn't a thing.
We were solving problems,
right? What we learned was we learned the skill sets, and we learned how to take that skill set and apply it to a different problem around hacking, and we ended up in a culture of look, I was a 7th grader, and I said I wanted to be an electrical engineer, and that was my career path. Mm-hmm. Now, most kids at 7th grade can't ever do that, right? If you think about all of our kids, in mine included, they don't know what the hell they want to be when they grow up in.
I still don't
grade.
know what I want to be when I grow up.
Right. We most of us, in some respects, don't. Right. But I said I want to be an electrical engineer, and I went through this electrical engineering program, and I learned all kinds of crazy shit about physics and all this shit. Right. But what I realized was, okay, I understood the physical, the hardware components of how systems work, but I didn't understand the software aspects. Mm-hmm. And when I went through my master's program, I said, I want to learn the software side of this. And I spent a lot of time in databases and building all object-oriented databases, all this crazy shit. I didn't know that was aspects of a hacker environment when I went through curriculum, right? And so if I think about our young folks, and I think about where they're thinking about, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? How do they say, I want to be a hacker, I want to be in security, I want to be in this space? This stuff just fell on my plate after the fact of going through a bachelor's and a master's degree. Right?
I think a lot of us kind of fell into it, though.
Bill.
So my comment there is we live in a different time, right? So like when we were growing up, the term hacker didn't really exist, right? And so like you didn't know. And same with me. I didn't realize until I was out of college, I was in my first like career job. Oh my gosh, what I've been doing has been hacking, and I've been doing that since high school, right? Mm-hmm. And Larry, it kind of goes back, like my history goes back with you. It was about BBSs. I didn't know that, when I was trying to dial into that BBS that was in Boston or in California, wherever it was, whatever it took for me to get there, like I didn't know I was hacking. I was just trying to accomplish a goal.
Solve a problem at all costs.
Creative problem solving.
Right. But the difference now is that term exists. Right, so the term hacker exists now, and so like when we take a look at the kids now, and they say, I want to be a hacker, like when we were growing up, you didn't say I want to be a hacker because it didn't exist.
Right, you're right.
Right.
I just want to get porn.
So if the term exists now,
you're right.
If the term exists
that's
now,
exactly right.
What I wanted to get to. It wasn't matter whether it was porn or whatever it was.
Games or
right. The point was we wanted to find a way to get to the data we wanted to get
but
to.
you didn't have a term to put that. And you're right.
If the term exists now, we should define it.
So
and if we define,
I got really wasted.
Wait, Paul.
One night and wrote a document.
Define a term, hacker. I don't think we could come in the time we have left with a uniform, universal definition of what hacker is.
Hold on, wait. I took a stab at that. Under the
I'm sure you were wrong, but go ahead.
Go.
I'll read some from what I wrote, trying to capture what a hacker is. And
doesn't that mean you have to listen to it?
One of the things we haven't talked about, perhaps, or maybe we have.
He is the host, so you will listen.
I love books on tape.
Me too.
So one of the things I said was questioning social norms, never accepting things for what they are, and believing controls are just for those who follow the rules, which is really not you, right?
I love it.
I agree with those aspects, but I don't think those are the essence of what a hacker is. I think that's the essence of something else that I don't know what the term is. I don't know if there is a term.
I think
probably
that's
is.
the
No,
beauty
I
of
totally
having the hacker,
disagree, Jeff.
because
That is
you
exactly.
can change what you want that word to be. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't apply just because somehow the news is thought hacker has to do with computers, or like when I see like a computer hacker hacked into Ring or whatever, I'm like, no, it should say is someone has a terrible password and they reuse it everywhere. That should have been the slogan.
Scientific hooligan.
Hey, listen, if you guys haven't hung out with Trent before, you need to do it, because he embodies a hacker. Like there's been times when we physically hacked when we're not hacking a system.
I also, in what you guys have embodied is another thing I wrote: finding a way and never accepting no for an answer.
That's right.
There we go. I agree with that. I agree with all of those qualities.
I think Paul nailed it.
Grew on a truck. Don't accept no for an answer.
I think Paul nailed it. The ultimate bottom line is what Larry just said. Don't accept no for an answer.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
What a hacker is and it's technology, it's system independent. It is somebody who is going to chase the answer no matter what.
Yeah, no means that I didn't ask the question.
But one thing I want to add in here, though, is that we didn't talk anything about moral compass.
Okay.
Because all of us have some level of a moral compass.
Right.
Speak for yourself.
I mean, I would say we're in it for the greater good. We're in it for the greater community.
It all depends on how finely tuned that compass is.
Malicious versus.
But hey, that's a gradient. Right? That's a gradient. I agree.
Definitely, they're evil hackers, bad hackers, right? But the other thing I wrote was, hackers embrace technology by making it more resilient through testing, tinkering, and exploration. But also that learning as knowledge is the key to unlocking possibilities that maybe other people don't consider, right? I think that's what
second one more than the first.
When I look back at what the hackers at MIT were doing, is things that other people just wouldn't consider, right? I wouldn't consider that those early PDP computers could create a robotic arm to catch a ball, right? But I'm going to do it because that's something someone else didn't think was possible.
Listen, I got to tell the story real quick. So there's been times where I've had access to places that I couldn't believe I had access to because Trent brought a badge that said security. Because other people hadn't considered
that.
Yeah. So I'm going to wrap this up in 3 words, right? And we talked about this last night.
Go to jail.
In Paul's place, right? Persistence.
Yeah.
Organization. And workaholic, right? If you think about what embodies a hacker in some respects is persistence, organization, and the ability to just work through the problem.
And I would add cheating in there. I'd add cheating in there. I mean, cheating.
There is no cheating.
Bill, to your point, I also wrote questioning social norms, never accepting things for what they are, and believing controls are for those who follow the rules.
That's right.
Paul,
Well, when we took
You
that
need to
painting
replace
that you had,
technology in that with something.
Like life.
Because biohacking
right. Yes,
is
absolutely.
about
You're
that.
100%.
It's
April, that's a
persistence.
great point. Yes.
It's organization.
You
Right.
don't have to be organized to be.
I agree with all of these.
There are a lot of disorganized hackers.
There's a lot of disorganized
Organization,
hackers.
right.
But if you are persistent and organized, and you work through that problem from a workaholic perspective, you're going to find a way in.
That's a big if.
Workaholic
Maybe
is
not
I
would say organized.
not the right
Tenacious,
word.
right?
in
Yeah,
your mind to solve the problem.
Curious
I would go with
tenacious.
that. The thought
Workaholic
process
implies
is
that
organized to solve the issue.
But
You have a
original
problem.
hackers were
Right.
people who solved problems. So
Yes.
you go back to the origin of the word. It's back into the 40s and 50s, and it was not about people that were breaking into things or anything like that. It was Hollywood. It was about the original engineers who solved new and weird problems that nobody thought of before in ways nobody had thought of. They injected people with seawater to see what would happen.
Yep.
And so that was where the word came
'cause
from.
Other people will accept things for what they are.
Yes.
Hackers think I can challenge that notion and do
Right,
something
so-
different to
Right,
basically go
exactly.
against.
That's
what
why I said
people
earlier,
accept.
challenge the process. We're
We took
constantly
that picture,
challenging
we went into
processes.
there, they were like not going to take a photo with us. I'm like, oh, we're doing a scavenger hunt. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's fine. Well, you can just
Yeah.
tear the store up. We don't care. It's part of a scavenger hunt. It's fine. Like they're like okay with it.
Right? You challenge the norm,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
We just went in
So
there with this giant painting, and they were like, oh, what are you doing? We're like, scavenger hunt. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're supposed to be here. Yeah.
I agree with all of this, but I still maintain these are attributes, characteristics.
Sure.
And attributes and characteristics are not, by definition, a definition. If you turn, go ahead, disagree with me, John.
Well, hold on.
No,
if
here's
I define an object in
Let me use an
Python or
example.
Java, I define its attributes, and that defines what it is.
You know,
right?
what is a computer?
Oh, God, get the weed.
What is the definition?
Look at your hand, man. Look at your hand.
My point being, what's the movie that came out a couple years
Why
ago?
do you park in a driveway and drive in a parkway?
There's a movie.
Is there a toll on the freeway?
We're way too sober for that.
There's a movie that came out a couple years ago, and I'm forgetting the name, about the
Matt, pass the champagne.
Hackers.
the women that
War Games?
the women that
Heavy.
were working for NASA and helped the Apollo space program.
Great movie.
Those
Awesome
people,
movie. Yes.
those people
I love that
Were
movie.
computers.
were called
Love that movie.
computers.
They were. The people were called computers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is a
So
computer? A bunch of
what is
levers
it?
and a bunch of marbles. I mean, it is what it is.
Ooh, Michi's Max box.
Bingo.
There you go.
An abacus is a computer.
Hold on, Lee.
Yeah. So one thing about the term hackers, a hacker term goes back farther than we think.
It does.
Shelley sent me a message. Back in 1990, a friend of ours, Brian Leibowitz at MIT, wrote a book on the Journal of Institute for Hacks, Tomfoolery, and Pranks at MIT that covered from the 1800s.
Similar book right there. Makers is the one of the MIT.
1989.
Right.
So I think, Doug, you're
You should
right,
read
but
that.
your time frame is too short.
No, I wasn't saying that was where it started. I was just saying that was one of the
No, so
origins of the-
I'm actually
you're
agreeing
absolutely
with
right.
you.
Everybody should read that paper too. That's a very important
and I
paper.
think
The
we-
movie
and I
was
think
called
about
Hidden Figures. But
and I think yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the book is better than the movie. But now
It's
I think
awesome movie.
now I think about that, Lee.
But only if you
that
listen to it.
You gotta listen to it.
No, we have hard copies in the house.
How do you listen to hard copy?
And a reader.
How do you read that while you're driving?
You don't.
So
you
what-
read it in bed before you go to sleep.
What speed
But
do you
think-
listen that on?
You think about that
Regular speed.
You think about that book, Lee, from the 1800s, and I think about some of the other things. Is that these hackers at MIT? I think about the college stadium, the football stadium, where they want to have this message against the other football team, and I the details are fuzzy because alcohol. But they had a problem. They had a problem that they wanted that they had to solve,
And they solved it.
wanted to pull a prank. So how do they do it? They
Stormed the field and delayed the Harvard Yale game.
No, they break into the stadium at some ungodly hour and they plant something into the field that they can trigger remotely. So this balloon comes out of the middle of the field that no one knows about. This is a problem. They
hold
want
on.
they want a prank that they need to find a solution to.
I want to go back to Jeff's comment of that what we've been defining is attributes of a hacker, and I think it's much like similar to like DevOps is a process, right? Hacking is what I wrote, a mindset, a culture, and a spirit, right?
I think, but I think mostly it's a
not defined
mindset.
process, right? Because we define that in everything we do as
I
hackers,
agree
right?
with that.
A mindset, a culture, and a spirit.
Yes, I agree.
I wholeheartedly.
That's easy for you to say.
Use your words.
What he said.
Use your words.
I wholeheartedly
Job whole fart in that one.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
That's how they say it in Australia.
Chimney sweep in the house.
No, I do. That's well
He
said.
came down the chimney.
There's something caught in the chimney. It's been there since last Christmas.
Somebody please hand me a towel.
You know who was a hacker?
That's
Whoever
well said,
back in
Paul.
the history of warfare where they used to stand in fields and shoot at each other, whoever figured out I should hide behind a tree. He was a hacker.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a problem. I don't want to die.
That's beautiful.
Hide behind a tree.
Here's the problem. I don't want to die.
You got
How do I solve that?
Jeff played it's a pretty valid point, right?
That's how war was. Walk in a straight line and get shot at.
World of War, you would face each other on the battlefield. But then,
I don't want to die, man.
Appointed time.
right? Point in time, right? You would stand field to field, and you would go through armory, and then you would have these people come out of trees, like nowhere. That was a great hacking environment. Why do you think we exist as a country?
What are you saying?
Because we
People
figured
came out of trees.
because you could.
Is that what you're saying?
Because you could.
Oh man, just don't go there.
And it was just this whole.
Because we figured out we could hide behind a goddamn rock.
I want to know who hacked Matt. Who hacked Matt?
But you have some.
Somebody hacked Matt.
Paul, rescue us. Paul, please rescue us.
Please take us home.
Oh my.
Are we
Send it home, Paul.
already?
No.
What? No. Keep going.
Keep going. Keep going.
We started late.
We started way late.
We did. We
Look,
did.
I love hacker culture, and I love the people in this room.
I love you, man.
Oh, we love you.
I love you in an, kind of agnostic, non-gay kind of way.
Hey, I love you in an extremely gay way.
Well, man, April.
Where are the towels?
Later.
Wow.
Later.
It's part of our culture. I think hugs are part of our
Way to
culture.
hack a compliment.
But
Let's let him talk.
But look, I think what everybody is saying is hacking is about a creative, inventive thinking, and it is about not accepting what the world is putting out to us. It's about questioning everything. That's what hacking is. Yep. It's about putting out open questions like, look, you say it's supposed to be this way. I disagree.
But
I'm going to test
argue
it.
That hacking starts with a question.
It starts with a question.
All great scientific experiment, right? Start with a question.
But we wouldn't have a question if we didn't have a problem.
Yeah, right. But I would also add it's a drive to answer that question, right? So the question may exist, right? It's the persistence.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
I'm going to say the worst thing ever. It's thinking outside the box.
Oh.
Is that worth a drink? That's worth a drink.
Yeah, you have to do a line of heroin for that one.
Hold on.
No, let me get.
Hold on. One of my goals for this segment was to go to our host that hacked on the earliest computer, and I'm looking around the table. No judgment. I'm looking at Jeff, Doug, and Lee. Like who?
Well, thank God I'm not in that group.
The longest. Jeff, you're just barely skating under the radar here. I'm just throwing it out there. Yep. Love you and all, but
love you, man.
Hot tub time machine. Let's go.
What was the first? You said PDP 11 earlier.
I was on before that.
You were on before
PDP
that.
10?
IBM mainframes or
PDP 7.
What, now, not using
PDP
hacking.
Come on, Paul. Paul,
have a
real
problem
quick.
that you need to solve.
PDP 7. Okay. Lee, you have a rich history. You talked about in Altair and what was the S bus?
That was the S100 bus.
S100 bus. Yeah.
I'll tell you the the oldest computer I ever tried to hack.
Abacus.
No, not quite. Well, I have used an abacus. Okay, yes, I'm old.
But Jack Daniel's not here, and if he was, I would say Jack. Like Egyptian scriptures, right?
So
we shouldn't do it.
Let me set it up. Let me set it up before I tell you the computer. So in my high school, they had a computer in the room. Drop, don't die on us. There was a IBM System 610 from World War II.
Oh my God!
It was a combination of relays and transistors.
Yeah.
Did you have to pull a lever to get it to process?
Well, actually, to regulate the power, it had capacitors in it. And as it charged up to enough power to run, the relay would flip. It would run off the capacitors. When the capacitor started discharging, it would flip back.
So Paul,
wow.
Oh, and I tried to get that working. It had a cathode ray tube about that big and a wired hard key terminal. It was from the 40s.
So age aside, having worked on the oldest computer, does Lee take the cake on this?
Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, he wins.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in.
Hold on. Time out, Bill.
We shouldn't do this, right? So, I'm going to blow your all mind, right? My first computer was a 486. In my hacker.
What is wrong with you?
But, hey, you know what? Let's do it.
That's ages.
Come on, let's do it.
Nothing the hell wrong with that,
bro.
We shouldn't talk about age, right? We shouldn't talk about age.
Was it DX or
it was an SX, right? It was an SX.
It had the turbo button.
But it did.
Oh, it had the turbo button.
We should talk about our favorite computer.
Listen, around the table, we shouldn't compute age as being a hacker, right?
No, it's
100%.
And by the way, guys, I'm not I wish that I had been involved with computing that early. I wish that I had, right?
Agree.
But my first computer, though,
I don't.
the first one that I got access to was a 486, right? And I'm still a hacker.
No, Bill, I wasn't trying to say you're not a hacker if you didn't work on early. I was just curious.
Just because you're young, it doesn't mean you're not.
Listen, homie,
Lee
I'm
wins
not
the
young.
prize, which I'm not sure is actually winning, of working on the oldest computer.
It was paying respects to the elders.
I was like, thank you.
Hold on. I want to go to April's point of what was your favorite computer to hack on? One of you, maybe early computers you hacked on. For me it was the Apple IIe, and I'm really upset that I don't have that original computer, and I think one of my goals, I want to have an Apple IIe to just have that reminder. It's interesting, I found the 5 1/4 floppy disk with the completely white label on it that was labeled Paul by my instructor when I was 7. That's my source code. Now, the joke I make is it's not much better than the source code I write today. But
it's not a joke.
It's probably the same size, right?
It's not a joke. It's the truth. It's the truth. Truth.
That 5-inch floppy.
I'd like to modify your question.
Oh crap! I'm a 3.5.
3.5. More than 3.5.
That's why he asks about my Python all the time.
Micro SD in Paul's case.
Go around and touch.
So actually,
Lee.
I'd like to extend Paul's question slightly.
Sure.
One is,
Extend his Python.
when, at what age
Should
did
use
you
that.
get, as opposed to saying hacking, what age did you get hooked on computers?
Yeah, that's
And-
a better
Yeah, good.
question.
Yeah.
and
better
I would
question.
modify, and the second one, you're saying, what was the computer you loved hacking? I was going to say, what was the computer you used that you don't have anymore you'd love to have now?
I'll go first on that one.
So what
would-
age and the computer you would love to have today?
Let's go around.
I was 2.
Yeah, we should go around.
I was
All right,
2 years
Larry's
old.
first.
I was 2 years old, and I distinctly remember this. It's one of the few memories of my childhood, just because reasons. But I remember sitting on my dad's lap at the. And that wasn't the reasons.
That sounds frightening, Larry.
He knows this audience.
A TRS-80 Model 1
Oh, baby.
with the actual monitor and not a TV.
Ooh.
Yes.
With tape
Yes.
and a printer that my dad built that didn't come with a case, so he had to fabricate his own case. You have a problem, solve it.
Wow.
So he went to work and
Not
he,
surprising where you came from, Larry.
no,
Just to be, like
so-
15 years of doing podcasts with you, like not surprised.
Yeah,
at
so
all.
he had to build a printer for this because he wanted a printer, and the printer didn't come with a case, and you couldn't buy a case. You had to build your own case. Many people built it out of wood, but he went to work and he made one out of plexiglass because that's the material he had
How
access
cool
to.
is
He made a
that?
plexiglass printer.
That's fucking awesome.
But people pay huge money for that.
Yeah, I
shit.
was gonna.
I want a wood printer. How cool is that?
And I remember, I remember
box.
being 2 years old and learning how to add to 21 because the only game we had was poker.
Oh,
Yeah.
poker or blackjack?
Nice.
I'm sorry, blackjack.
We're gonna live stream
Blackjack.
poker after this on this
Yeah,
show.
blackjack.
Interesting.
But and I specifically remember this because not only was my dad playing blackjack on the computer because it took forever to load the next card, he was also working, and one of the things that he was working with was acetone to assemble parts to effectively fuse plastic parts together. And I reached up to play the next hand, and I actually dropped the cup full of acetone down my diaper.
It's amazing you have children.
That was only a year ago, folks. That was only a year ago.
It's amazing your voice isn't higher.
Kidding.
It's amazing how things go full circle.
And with that,
See the scars.
how are you going to follow that, Jeff?
Jeff.
Well, the question was, when did you fall in love with computers?
Yeah.
I didn't.
Okay, that's fair.
I fell in love with problem solving.
Okay, at what age?
And puzzle, but very knowing you, Jeff, for as long as I have, very much a puzzle solver.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I grew up in a household where we had this thing called a newspaper, and the newspaper had the funny pages, and in the funny pages there was a trivia quiz and a check your knowledge, and we would, as a family, we would ask those questions at the dinner table.
oh, I remember those. That was cool.
And you know, so that's why.
But your vocabulary definitely. Today, I'm like, I have to, like I said before, like I have to look shit up. Like
on
what
the
you say-
thesaurus, which
on the
is really, you should be using a
dictionary.
But
I don't even know which fucking resource to go to. But at
Just
an early age, that makes sense that you were doing those puzzles, right?
so my father was a physicist. He worked at Naval Research Laboratory, and he was involved with the and got to witness the detonation of the first hydrogen bomb.
Oh, Jesus.
So, you know, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of good things to say about my dad. That's a whole other story. But the things that he instilled in me and my brothers was, and we've all gone different paths, but critical thinking, which I think is something that's essentially
Incredibly
part
important.
of the hacker mentality, and problem solving. I'm a little bit of a handyman. I got that from my dad.
Yep.
Yeah. If you've ever tried to do any kind of home improvement project, whether it's building framing for a wall or doing drywall or doing electrical work,
Or deploying an antenna for your ham radio.
Whatever it is,
Whatever
if
the
you've got
purpose,
the right tools, it's a cinch. If you don't have the right tools and you don't want to spend the money to buy the tool to use it once, you've got to figure out how to do it with what you've got.
And that's one thing that I have gone forward and said, use the right tool for the right job. But sometimes you don't have the right tool, so use the best tool that you have.
Use what you've got.
I mean, if you don't have the right tool for the right job, you have a Sawzall and you're good.
Yeah.
I mean, let me finish. Why I'm here today is because I ended up working for the NSA, and I got a job there because I like to do puzzles. Why I got into all this was because I like to do puzzles. I like, and there's been a phase.
That was your upbringing, though.
That was my upbringing.
Yeah, but that's cool.
But the hacker mentality, the critical thinking was something that, I mean, yes, I think I was born with it, but.
Maybe it's
something.
Great minds think alike, April.
Marketing.
Ninja plug.
I think it's Doug's turn. I think
it's my turn.
My final thought was a lot of the marketing hype is security as a game, and I don't think of it as a game. I think of it as a puzzle.
Yeah.
There's a solution.
Agreed.
And I've focused my hacking skills for the last 15 years or so on what I think we would all agree is the hardest part is the people aspect. How do we hack the culture? How do we hack the corporation? How do we hack the people and get them to understand and change their ways? The computer stuff we've all know and we've proven is
the people is the harder part, right?
People's the hard part.
Peopling is hard.
Y'all are just selling out doing the easy stuff.
Doug, what's interesting is you're pretty close to Lee in early computing times. And
because you're an old fucker.
But you know what? But hold on. You know what I realized early on in my career is old farts rule, right? Talking to people that had been doing computing 5, 10, 15, 20 years before me, I wanted to hang out with those people, right? I wanted to know how computing worked.
That's why we love
in those times, right? Yeah. All those lessons transfer. Talking to Doug and Lee and people who've been around computing longer than I have, right? I learned so many lessons, right? And Doug, I call upon I don't know what that new technology is, but if we think about this in like computing and network terms, Doug and I have like designed our network here and solved other problems based on your experiences.
So my dad started his career as an analog programmer. He plugged wires. He had no training, no knowledge, no nothing. And I remember when I was a little kid, he had all these booklets and things that he got from the lab, and that got me interested in computing. And when I was 14 in 1977, I told my dad I either wanted to be.
I was born.
Yeah, we've heard that before. I told him I either wanted to be a guitar player or a programmer, and he said programmer.
Yeah, there's more money in programmer, son.
Oh, I learned that too. But I started working on a PDP-7, and it was a dial-up. It was horrible. It was just a nightmare. So the first time I ever really got enraptured of a machine was when I went to the university. They had a DEC 10. And I had been working on the PDP-7, and
first you were kind of like pre-UNIX days, college DEC 7,
and it was very
more
it was very tedious.
What was the DEC Alpha Unix? Was it Alpha? What was the Unix?
A DEC Alpha.
There was a DEC Alpha, right?
And that's when they brought out OSF1 was their first Unix.
Yeah.
But I went to the university, and I went down to the computing center and asked them if they had any jobs. And they said, well, we would if you knew anything about DECs. And I said, okay, does PDP count? And the guy said, you know something about PDP? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, we just got a DEC 10. Would you like to be one of the administrators? And I started working on that, and it had a terminal. It had it was so nice. And I just got really entranced with that DEC 10 and the fact that you could do so many things, and it had shells and all this capacity. I never
you had a keyboard and a monitor, which at that time was
no. It was God damn! I've got a keyboard and a monitor, and
something we take for granted when we get a cell phone, right?
Hell yeah! And I was I got this keyboard, I got a monitor, I can display 7, 8 characters at a time on the screen. I was just blown away. And I really just sort of fell in love with that DEC 10. And if there was a computer I wish I still had in my basement today, I wish that was it. Because, I mean, even though it would fill my whole house, I guess. But, I mean, the hard drives are the size of, like, industrial washing machines and things. But it was a really cool system that I had not seen before. And I wasn't used to because it was interactive. You could do things you had never done. And it was the first time I really saw the opportunities to do things that were like hacking things. We had done weird hacking stuff before, like splicing weird shit onto punch tape and stuff and going, look, if I do this, I can take over this guy's account. But all of a sudden, I actually had an account. I could get in. I could actually do things on my own. And it really just sort of drew me right into it. And I said, this is my baby. And in fact, they turned it off later. And I was so sad when they turned it off because it had never been turned off in all these years.
Whoa.
And that thing was like, it was like, I don't know, it was
turning computers off and on back in the day, by the way, was a process. Not like today when you're like, Windows crashed to like reboot.
Well, we have like the
was
IPL.
A process, right?
We had the IPL manuals, and the IPL manuals were like volumes 1 through 6, and it took like 6 hours to shut the thing down, and it was never designed to be turned off.
Right.
And
it wasn't.
We did the IPL when they were going to kill it. And
initial program load?
It's an intentional power loss.
Oh, really? But I always thought of it as like you're turning it off and bringing it up for the first time kind of thing.
It's an intentional power loss.
Really?
It's like that stuff on Windows where they say, why are you shutting me down? Would you please put a note in here?
Interesting.
And
I never knew that.
And we had to IPL that thing, and I was like, wow, this is like a funeral. And everybody went down to the basement, and when they got it all shut down and we did the whole IPL, I did it. I actually sat there and typed all the commands, and I shut down all the peripherals, and I shut down all the pieces. And we went down to the basement after it was shut down, and there was this big bus bar that powered it, and it was shut down. And the guy,
I have like tears right now.
I know.
Me too, dude. Me too.
All this alcohol has made me like, God,
hey, me too, man. Me too.
I'm like, I just love you, baby.
Holy shit, we're only 3 people deep at this point.
Jesus, what is coming? What is coming, I tell you.
And they couldn't find the keys to the padlocks on the bus bar, and we had to cut the padlocks off with the bolt cutters, and they let me pull the bus bar.
And the padlocks bled.
Yeah. Oh, man. We shut the thing down, and I was sitting there going, what happens to it now? And they were like, it goes to the scrap heap. They're going to cut it up. And I was even today. I'm still. I mean, I'm like, damn.
Even today, he wears one of the memory chips on a necklace around his neck.
Larry, get that tattoo. Get that tattoo.
So that was mine.
In its defense, the computer
Shit,
did
Tyler,
have a
see if you can
DNR.
beat that shit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It knows what it did.
Hey, you're up.
So,
all right, Tyler.
Tyler's up.
Tell us about your Nintendo.
No.
Ouch!
So my quad core.
I had to suffer with a 386.
I had to do a reboot.
So, actually, honestly, and like to follow up something you said a while back, the amount of time that you've been in the industry and/or done security, really, we have to make sure that the next generation understands that they have a
Pentium, wasn't it?
a leaping point. They can stand on giant.
Come on, what was your first computer?
My
When did you first? When did you fall in love? When did you?
my first computer.
No. The question is, when you fall in love.
When I fell in love was probably, so we were poor. We didn't have computers. High school.
It's
a Pentium 3.
Hey, it's okay.
awesome.
Hey,
that was cool. That was cool.
Those were cool.
Apple IIe. I had Apple IIe at my grandparents' house.
But the one you fell in love with.
A Pentium 3 800 because we realized we could overclock and do something that it was not designed to do.
There you go.
And
Bingo.
we could make it go faster, and I could do a lot more things.
He realized he could hack it.
To play Leisure Suit Larry.
I never played games on computers.
No, in our day,
I played that game.
I remember taking moonshine and spitting it into the carburetor of the computer to make it go faster. That's what we called overclocking, goddammit.
I'm fixated on April and her freakishness right now.
But no. So what's the computer you wish you still had?
Probably my grandpa's Apple IIe that I played Hangman on with the dropper helicopter thing.
I wrote Hangman on the Apple IIe.
There you
as
go.
An exercise in class.
That's awesome.
Right.
Oh, Paul.
And Tyler played it.
I wrote Mastermind.
I have an Apple IIe in the
I think I got wood right
I gotta
there.
get one.
And my code was
be
on
honest.
punch tape.
April.
Oh.
Come on, April.
Okay.
Come on, baby.
So first computers were
Nope. Nope. The
well, no,
computer
no,
you
no.
fell in love with.
I'm going through everything. Hold on. I'll be quick.
Go for
I
it.
promise.
You'll be quick.
First
She'll rip the
computers
Band-Aid off.
were like at school. I think it was an Apple II,
Okay.
and then at home it was a Commodore 64.
Awesome.
What did you fall in love with?
Well,
How did
Doesn't
hold
have
on.
to be
I don't know that we're friends. We're not in love necessarily.
Okay.
But I had the weirdest computer. It was an Apple clone.
Oh, that's
And
right.
it was
I
a
forgot about those.
Radius 81110, and it was a tower machine,
yeah.
and it was so much faster than the actual Macs.
Oh, sweet.
And that's the machine that like I started on IRC and all this other stuff, and I had
awesome.
and then I
That's
built
rocks.
my own Linux machine. It was like a
Oh,
386
baby.
or something because I wanted to be able to connect to the internet. So what I did was I read a Unix book in detention.
Oh,
We need to hear more
So,
about this.
so I read a Unix book.
God, yes.
why were you in detention? Come on.
I skipped
It
a
was that
lot
Mac
of school.
PC war.
I skipped a lot of school, and I hated school. So
I'm a little
like,
hard right
I'd
now.
say I had a
right
lot of detention. So I wanted to. I had a PPP dial-up account, and it was like a Unix account, and I would get on IRC that way.
Awesome.
And I wanted to understand more about the environment
Like,
that I was
this is
in.
my new recruiting strategy.
And
Kids
what
in
is IRC?
detention that are reading books about computers, I want to hire them, right?
What is IRC? Is that like Slack?
Shut up, Bill.
So my
Like Jabber or Slack?
Yeah,
Door is right
Slack
there.
without the pictures, Bill.
my
Slack without the
my
pictures.
school didn't have a computer program like we did HyperCard and some other like BS.
Yes.
So they
Oh my
actually
gosh, I remember
created
HyperCard.
a class for me and weirdly enough another female named April.
Oh, that's
The weirdest thing ever. So
Yeah, the
they
April squared class.
created a special class for us to teach us programming as like part of something they were trying to make into a bigger thing. But like we didn't have the internet at school or anything at
Okay.
this point. Like it was
Where's-
pre-internet.
it was
Where's
just
the
April
other April
squared.
today?
That's cool.
That's
So the
awesome.
computer you wish you still had?
Oh, I don't care. I'm not
Any
like a big
computer
old
will do.
computer.
Okay, that's
I want the new computer. I don't
That's
want an old
fine. The
computer.
The newest one.
That's
yeah.
a great answer, though.
Yeah.
That's
Why
awesome.
take up space with the old computers when we have a new
Exactly.
computer?
Oh,
Yeah.
fuck.
I like
Who fucked up? All right. Hey,
Patrick.
Oh,
What,
Jesus.
Who, me?
Mark, really? What the fuck? Okay, Patrick, do it.
So this is going to probably be not real interesting after April's detention story and before these two guys actually get to talk.
Go for broke.
No, why not?
Come on, Patrick.
Like the first computer I ever had was the TRS-80 that was kind of discussed.
Trash
you know,
80.
Trash 80.
Wait,
Model
now, which
one?
model?
Oh,
Was it gray or beige?
I think it was gray and with the
Was it-
U-clips that went onto the back of the TV and all that.
Was
kind
the
of stuff.
screen green or orange?
Oh.
There was no screen.
There was no screen. It might have been a Model 1 or Model 2.
Well,
Yeah.
wait. If it was the kind
the
that
Model
went,
3 was
did
the
it
first
use your
that was beige.
TV, not its own?
Right.
Hey,
that was a
let the
color
man
computer.
talk.
What's that?
That was the color
TRS
computer.
color computer.
Color
yeah.
computer.
Okay, because the only thing I remember, you
And
know,
they came in white.
Go-
Beige and gray.
going through the manual and
Just give
trying
a
to figure
towel.
out how to program this thing. And the first thing I wanted to do is create like this trivia game and code in all the questions, ran it. It's like it just immediately went right up with all the questions and answers. I'm like, well, that's no good. So then, of course, it's how do we make this thing kind of work, and figured out where pause was in BASIC. So it's like
Awesome.
ask the question, wait this long, and then the questions would all kind of come up from there. So
And
that
then
was about-
pause and then go to.
that was exactly go to the next line. So you just kind of sit there and be like, oh, the answer's this, and the answer would come up, and then the next question.
So, which one do you wish you could have back?
I guess that one would probably be fun to have back and try again with.
Although I still like April Central. Like I want a new computer, never want an old crap.
I think we all love new computers, but this is the one we'd love to have and take
All
care
right,
of.
let's move on. We got no fucking time left.
Tilo.
All right. So in my family, we had a war. Dad was PC, was Zenith. Mom was Apple IIe.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus.
It's amazing you're here.
So you had both at home, and you were one of those rich kids.
Yep.
Kind of like that. So that's why my parents probably are divorced, because Dad was PC and Mom was Mac. So like on the Mac and the Macintosh. I don't know if you Zany Golf. Anyone play?
Yeah,
that?
oh yeah.
Might have played that. Yeah,
Oh.
that sounds familiar.
I remember the original
The
Zany
Oregon
Golf.
Trail on the Apple IIe.
Oh,
yeah.
Oregon Trail was an online systems game. Yeah,
Yeah.
So
my favorite was shit.
Spy Hunter.
No, what was the one with the boat that they crashed and
Gilligan's Island.
no, it was
I think it's supposed to know. Whoever said that. Yeah.
Swiss Family Robinson.
Okay.
There you go.
It was when I really started falling in love would be at a gray screen laptop Macintosh that was on the internet, had dial-up. Mom had written. My mom was a teacher. She had written a grant to get, hours. If you remember those free hours.
Yes.
Mom bought like 1,000 hours for her school, and I started using that. And one night she's like, one day she comes to me like, how did you use 200? You cannot use this anymore. So that's hacking AOL came along. And so I would have to say, I'd have to say that the 2E is something special just because that's where I just started playing with the computer. I mean, I fell in love in the internet world, but just having that, that sense of the old computer, the way it started up, the screen, how it would blink out, and that sort of thing.
Next.
That's amazing, dude.
That's very cool.
So first of all, I just want to say this is amazing. I don't care how long this goes. We need to keep this up. This is amazing.
That's great.
If it stays up for more than 4 hours, you should seek a medical professional.
I need to pee though, so do your thing.
There's a point where I need to pee.
You do you, and Paul's going to do thimble bladder. He's going to do him.
So listen, there's a few of us around the table that I've known before tonight, but I think you learn so much about somebody with this conversation. So the computer that I love, right? So when I think about the one that how did I know about computing and what made me love about computing was, so it goes back to that same area, so that 486. And I had, the story was I was starting to hack. I didn't really know what hacking was, right? And I was starting to hack. And I had done something to my Windows 3.11 system. Mm-hmm. And whenever I turned the thing on, it would not boot into Windows. It would go straight to DOS. Okay. And I took it to Best Buy, and I took it to the guy, and he showed me, well, the reason why it's not starting is because there's a semicolon, or in the path.
You messed up your config.sys, didn't you?
I had messed up. That's exactly right. It was the exact auto exec.
I'm scared that I know
right?
that.
And at that point, that's the point where I realized I know nothing about. I thought I was a hacker, but I didn't know what that term was. But I thought I knew about computing, but I didn't know that the difference between a colon and a semicolon was very different in computing.
Now, were you editing those with edit. Or were you using CopyCon?
No, I was using
Nano.
Edit. No. Yeah, now Nano.
What even is Nano?
Nano's the fucking best. That's what it is.
Real hackers use Nano.
VI.
April, it's VI for noobs.
I've never heard of VI. But anyway, so what caused me to love computing was that was the realization when I realized that like punctuation matters, right? And that's what that got me in there. And so when I think about what would be the computer that I'd want now, it's less about the computer and about the computing, I guess. So the application layer, and it goes back to the story. And I'm sorry if this guy. There's no chance this guy's listening, but. So this guy back I was in high school, and we were having we got in
relations.
It was girl related, and I used an application. It was called the Hacker's Choice HTC dialer,
THC,
the word dialer.
THC.
Yeah, THC word dialer, and I had paged every pager in the area that I lived in, every pager to call his number with a 911, right? And then a week later, I called him, and it was busy, because my computer had paged everyone. Everyone.
Awesome.
And I do.
Pager
and
bomb.
pager bomb, and that level of computing, I just love that. I wish we could have that level. I had no concern about the FBI showing up, right? About cops. It was like, look, I'm going to make your phone busy for a week, right? That's what I miss. I miss that. Right?
Awesome.
I did that to
Without
the
the
school.
consequences.
I did that to the school so they couldn't call my house to tell my parents that I was
that you skipped
Right.
school.
And then I found out that you could block the school with the phone number.
Yeah.
The secret access number.
Joe,
You've got a dial-up bomb. You haven't lived, so.
Well,
yeah. Joe, you're up.
Jay?
Jay, sorry,
Yeah,
Jay,
it's all
you're up.
good. It's all good.
Alcohol.
It's all good. For
Whatever your
me,
name
for
is.
me, it's totally nostalgic, right? So I'm first generation American. My family came over here from Portugal, and when they came over, what did they do? They went and worked in the factories, right?
Okay.
And my grandparents worked in the Texas Instruments factory. And when I was about 6 years old, one of the gifts they gave me was a TI 99 4A.
Yeah.
Right? Texas Instruments 99 4A. That's what they gave me as a gift.
Ooh.
Because they got,
Do you have drug wars?
basically they got OEM pricing, right?
Right.
I love that.
Right? And what they did was they were able
It
to
was
get...
only $9,000.
It was like a 16-bit. It was a 16-bit processor, right?
It was-
But there was all these add-ons, and I remember it had a speech synthesizer that I could play Parsec and Alpiner with the speech synthesizer add-on. And from there, it was like, all right, if something's broken, how do I fix it? Oh, wait a minute, I could go ask my grandparents to go back to TI and ask somebody at TI, and they would come back. And I'm like 6 or 7 years old doing this, right?
Wow.
So for me, it's the nostalgia of, by chance, my grandparents got me this Christmas gift that they were able to get a discount because they worked for the factory, and they handed it over to me. And little did I know, it just created that want and that need to always be tinkering, right? And always be messing with video game systems and computers. And
Always
it
be
just,
hustling.
It just created that mindset for me, right?
Did you break it?
Always.
Yeah.
I
Always.
think
But
that everyone
that
here
was
has
the whole
broken
point.
their computer.
That was the whole point of sending my Volvo, my grandmother, back to the factory and ask somebody.
That's incredible.
How do I fix it, right? And I mean, you look at it and it was like it had a ROM cartridge, it had a cassette, and it had a floppy, and then you had to buy all these add-on peripherals for it. So for me, that was my exposure. And yes, I would love to have that just for nostalgia. My favorite toy to play on, right, was after I got out of the military, and it was IBM RS-6000 AIX, right? I mean, that's what I love to, that's where I got my meat, right? That's where I actually played. System administration, right?
That's amazing.
So,
I remember programming basic programs on my TI-81.
yeah.
And you could put all in math class you could have the TI-81.
put
So you
all
could
the
put
answers.
all the answers and the formulas
Yep,
and everything
yep.
in a program,
Yeah.
and they would have no idea.
Yeah. So I mean, again, it was just, I don't know if it was by chance or what happened, but my grandparents who came over on the came over here just to kind of create a life for themselves, worked in a factory. They handed me
it
this,
was a
what they thought
TI-99?
TI 99 4A.
Yes.
So that was like in the 80s, like 83ish, I guess you could say, when I was about 6. Yeah, they
I
handed
thought
that
they
over.
gave you a calculator because I had a TI-85.
No.
So I'm like,
I literally looked it. I literally looked it up. And I wanted to see what the value would be. And dude, it was like, if you modern day, it would be $1,500.
Oh,
Dang.
Right? I mean, that's what it would have cost. It was $525 back then.
I
And I'm
could
like,
buy
holy
like six
crap!
of
I
that
mean,
for
even if they
$300.
got a discount, they still spend some dough to get me this
Yeah,
thing,
that-
right? I
that
mean,
was
these guys
some
are
dough,
factory
yeah.
workers. My grandparents are factory workers. So
incredible.
it was kind of cool. They got me the exposure, and from there, it created that mindset and that need and that want and that, like I said earlier, intellectual curiosity to just keep going.
I wish they would have said boo Patriots. When
No. Actually, the Patriots really sucked back then. So
They really did.
All right, Lee, you're up.
Okay, so the computer that got me hooked, that I fell in love with computers, actually was back in it was either 69 or 70. So I was about 8 years old, playing on a timeshare HP 3000 in the Lawrence Hall of Science up in the Berkeley Hills, playing things like the lunar lander, where you adjusted the variables to get it to not crash,
Get out.
or the moon land, or
That predates all of us. Dude,
But- But that's what hooked
hold
me.
on, but it doesn't speak to your age, but the age that you got involved with computers,
Yeah,
Lee.
that's-
That's
Space age.
I mean,
that's
my
really
the
astonishing.
sad part is my grandfather took me up there. He had been a head of research for Standard Oil, and he was an inventor. And he took me there because he had friends who had worked on cyclotrons, which was a circular accelerator. And he wanted me to see those exhibits. I found the computer, and I spent a whole bunch of time over there.
Awesome.
So obviously I was hooked. But the computer I wish I still had, I mean, I want a modern computer for my day in, day out use, but the one I'd love to tinker with is one of the old S100 bus computers where you were, you're running CPM, you might have an 8086 card on it with your graphics renderer, you had the 8-inch and the 5 1/4-inch floppies on it, and you basically had a terminal, not a monitor. Whether it was the MSI 8080, the Altair, or the Data General Sol.
What's interesting is in the book that I referenced by Stephen Levy, right? They talk about Bill Gates' open letter to the community, where basically Microsoft, Gates, and Steve Allen had written, was it BASIC?
Yes, BASIC was the first thing he wrote.
For the Altair, right? And people copied it. And Gates wrote this very, very famous article in a computer magazine at the time that said, hey, you're stealing our software. Stealing software is bad. But the positive aspect of that was in that people stealing Microsoft software made it popular. Microsoft today largely is based on the popularity gained by people stealing their software. The irony, right, that they went through in copyright infringement. And the irony, like the double irony, I guess, in that like 70+% of, or something like that, in Azure is Linux-based systems. It's just astonishing.
It's crazy.
Astonishing.
Well, I worked in the 80s. I worked in the Radio Shack computer store, and one of the things when they went into
a moment of silence.
But so I sold those color computers and those Model 2s and the Model 3s and the Model 4.
A Tandy company.
Yes, a Tandy company.
Yep, I had a Model 3.
But the thing is that one of the things they talked about is when the Trash 80 Model 1 was released in the 70s, they licensed BASIC from Bill Gates, and they had to loan him lawyers to write the contract. Then at that time in the mid-'80s, they really needed help from some of Microsoft's lawyers to really go through the contract because they were so much bigger by that time. Just in 10 years.
What's amazing is I didn't realize that when I was programming on my Apple IIe was Woz. It was his BASIC.
Yep. Yes.
Then he ported to the Motorola 6502.
Yes.
And again to the Motorola 6800, right?
Yes.
That was his, basically, I mean, he had a team, right? But basically his
That was
BASIC,
Woz, yes.
Right? That was
So
Woz.
was MS Basics them stealing Bill Gates' BASIC?
MS Basic was Bill Gates' BASIC at some point.
Yeah, it was the Altair.
From the Altair.
Yeah, it was an evolution from the Altair.
And Bill Gates trivia, because Larry and I were talking last night about how old Black Hat was, and I was Googling it because that's how I learn anything these days.
As do we
Bill
all.
Gates keynoted Black Hat like back in 2005.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
That's cool.
Can I amend my answer?
Yes,
No.
please.
So
No, yeah,
I don't
you
want
can.
I don't want an old computer, but I want an operating system that is defunct now to come back. I want System 5. I want Solaris. I want freaking Solaris
Time out.
BOS.
I want
John
Sun
Kinsella
OS.
on a modern computer.
John Kinsella sent me an article about OS2 Warp. And he's like, do you know OS2 Warp? And I'm like, so it just by pure circumstance, I worked for an IBM point of sale retailer. Since they were so entrenched in IBM, they used OS2 Warp. I was an OS2 Warp administrator, and it talks about the whole evolution of OS2 Warp, the virtual machines that were created via Parallels, which still exist today in Mac OS, right?
Yeah.
And what was interesting is I had never considered, like, why did IBM never open source OS2 Warp? It was a great operating system back in the day.
Yes,
the
it
reason
was.
is there was too much Microsoft code that was proprietary and licensed and done in the partnership between IBM and Microsoft. They couldn't open source it. So it like basically freaking died on the vine.
I lost $100 when BOS went under.
I remember BOS. That was that Jobs' company?
No, that was Next Step.
That was Next Step.
I think I
But
still.
BOS was very similar to Next
It was
Step.
like an MIT.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think I
yes.
still have a DVD of BOS at home, and it was one of those write to your own DVDs type of CDs at the time, rather. And it's probably no good.
I love that we've covered most operating systems that way.
Java's got to go.
Right?
Joff. We're almost done. Joff.
So my earliest times in computing was Commodore 64. I spent a little bit of time with BASIC. I determined that BASIC was useless.
And you went to the assembly. What's interesting is Levy's book talks about that very distinct dynamic between, it very much describes hackers that looked at BASIC and was like, yeah, that's cute and all, but in order to write a game that could display graphics, for example, that were actually believable and didn't look like shit, I had to learn the assembly language for the processor that I was on.
That was Commodore 64. The whole
Atari was a platform.
Atari and a Commodore 64 were all very heavy assembly located.
So I
quickly
learned 6502 and 6510 assembler Motorola processor at the time.
So which one was the one you fell in love with?
I fell in love with the Motorola instruction set basically at that time. Quickly determined that I'd need to rewrite the kernel. Didn't like the operating system, rewrote it to do what I wanted it to do, and then wrote a network operating system pretty quickly thereafter. Enjoyed the hell out of it. Then moved up.
Something I never thought I'd say. I have a newfound respect for your skills, John. That is something. Just to put that in perspective, having been in computing at that time and read and listened to books in
that's not hacker. That's ninja.
That's ninja. Yeah, seriously, dude. Like that's.
Yeah, I mean, I just rewrote the operating system. I didn't like it.
We've all been there.
Not. Yeah. No. This was 8-bit times. Things were simpler.
Yeah. True.
My brother and I at the time, and my brother works in defense in Australia and has for a long time. We moved to the Amiga, which was the Motorola 68000.
A1000
series.
Joff A1000.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, loved that architecture. Really loved it. Kind of lost my way at that point. I didn't get deep into that chipset because I got enamored.
Because girls?
Well, there was that.
Yes.
That too. Yeah.
Always.
It plays a factor.
The wife.
Girls or guys, right?
But there was that. But I also got introduced to the early Australian University network, which was part of the ARPANET and part of the digital equipment.
So virtual
UUNet. It was UUNet.
So in other words, pictures of virtual girls.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to work at UNIX.
But Job PDP 11. Right time or
yeah, it was definitely PDP 11, but
Unix, like Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie had developed Unix.
They'd already developed it. Yeah. I came in post that time, and I was dealing with digital equipment and VMS in the early times when I was in college, early days, and it was UUNet. That was all about news groups and. University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill that did UUNet. It was amazing times. And lost track. I did not learn 68000 series assembler, but moved pretty quickly into the PC architecture after Digital Equipment Corporation and dealing with mainframe operating systems. So,
the one you wish you could have back.
The one I wish I could have back was the Amiga.
The A1000?
Yeah. The Amiga 1000 was an amazing piece of machinery.
That video hardware was amazing.
Yeah. The sprites.
Out of the box in 1986. Out of the box in 1986, it could display more shades of gray than the human eye could discern.
Yeah. I mean, we threw down, my brother and I actually co-funded it, and we threw down $2,500 for an Amiga 1000.
Was it U.S. dollars or Australian dollars?
It was Australian dollar, 2,000 U.S.
Bitcoin. Sure, I understood just how bad that was.
But that was
quite as impressive.
In 86,
that was a lot of money.
Bullshit.
You're talking about
mid-early
80s. That was a lot of money.
Shit ton of money.
In 85, 86, that was a shit ton of money.
Particularly for what age you were.
Yeah. And
that was like a car.
I do remember
like a lot of coins. You could go to the arcade and play video games.
Exactly,
right?
And I do remember my father actually getting involved because my father was like, You're freaking kidding me. You just told these guys you're going to pay like $2,200 for a computer that you don't have in your hands yet, because it was a forward thing. The Amiga hadn't landed yet.
There was like a Patreon account.
Yeah,
GoFundMe.
He was considerably irritated, but these were good times. I did not spend time on 68,000 Motorola, but 6802 and 6810, I knew that assembler backwards and forwards. I could rewrite that operating system like awesome. 10 times over.
And you probably still do in your sleep every once in a while.
Yeah, probably do. It was a good grounding because, you look at the Intel instruction set and it's not a mystery to me. It's
those principles apply.
Those principles absolutely apply, and I can hack the fuck out of anything. To be honest, it's all time, but
if you have that mindset, you can. I think is what we established on this segment, right? That's a mindset.
Yep.
Right. I just got it. It's
John, we're trying to move on to
it's right here, man.
You're good.
I'm getting emotional.
Oh my god. Oh, you need a hug?
Are you moist?
Get him a towel.
Get a towel. Somebody get a towel. Get this man.
We are out of
April,
towels.
Give him a spare towel.
The towels are out.
No.
You're a towel.
April, can you give him a dirty towel?
Towels are done.
April's not giving me a dirty towel.
He was like that.
Matt,
You never.
my first computing at home was the Commodore 128, so a little later than Joff, the 128.
Same series.
Same series, but when my parents decided we're gonna get a home computer, it was we're not going to go 64, we're going to go 128. So I got this Commodore 128, and we started programming all this stuff out.
It was go big or go home.
Yeah, well, but you got to understand, my dad was a factory worker. We didn't have a lot of money when I grew up, and I remember the 128 and programming the 128, and giving me the basics into BASIC, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, this is really cool. Right, and so, although I knew at that age, and this I would have been like 13, 14 years old.
Right.
I knew I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I already knew that in my career path. It's crazy. Kids at 13 don't know what they want to do when they grow up. And I'm like, I'm going to be an electrical engineer. But I got this fascination with computers. And so I took programming classes. I took BASIC and all the go-tos and all the fun stuff in there, and that was great. But the computer I remember building, the one that I want back, is my original 8086.
Okay.
I built my own 8086 box when I went to Case Western Reserve. I built my own system. I set it up myself. I put it in my dorm room.
Wait a minute. IBM PC 8086?
No, but it wasn't IBM. It was generic 8086.
What OS did you run?
Yeah, it was the 8086 processor, but it was not an IBM machine. I built my own clone.
Yes.
Right. And I spec'd my clone specifically for college, right? And so using the 8086 architecture from Intel, I built my own first computer. Spent a lot of time programming Pascal in early days of college, which some of us did, right?
I did in high school. Pascal. Yeah.
Right.
Pascal.
So that was about the roughly time I was in college, probably. So BASIC to Pascal, and started to learn programming languages. I didn't get to assembler until my master's program. Joff, it's dissimilar to you, right? Is you're growing up as an electrical engineer, you think about the physics and the hardware and the systems engineering. You don't think about the software side. And what I learned through, I was on scholarship, so I was working nuclear power for a number of years. I realized that I had all this hardware skill. The joke I make is the JK flip-flops. My professor in systems was Japanese, and he couldn't say the
Flip-flops, yeah.
It was a JFA flip-flop.
Okay.
Trent understands you very well.
Yeah, the JFA flip-flop.
Ni hao.
Ni hao. Ni hao.
Wait, that's Chinese. He just said Chinese, guys.
Chinese.
Wait,
But
isn't
he
it
was
just
Japanese, right? And he couldn't say the R's, right? So it was, he couldn't say the L's. So it was JFA flip-flop.
Domo arigato, Mr. Robot?
Wow.
So we're building all these
Totally
story about that.
sideways.
That's fucking racist. Come on now.
all these hardware-based systems, and I'm like, but I don't understand the software side of this. And so when I graduated with my bachelor's in electrical engineering and applied physics, I realized there was this beautiful side of software because it was all about capacitors and resistors and all this shit, right? And I had gotten introduced into computers at the plant and running the real-time systems, the PDP-11s, the VAX 11 780s in the early days. And I said, I got to round up my software skills. So I went back in my master's program to go after my computer engineering skill. And that's when I learned assembly, right? I didn't learn assembly until 90-something, right? In building assemblers. And so I was like, oh my God, I can influence how the registers work and all this stuff and all the stuff that you did early on. And started to build out my software skills. I haven't used those skills since literally 1996.
Matt,
literally.
So Matt, which one was the one you wish you could get back?
My 8086, my regional box that I built.
I was going to say may not be the original box you built, but we might be able to help you with that. Some of us have this shit in our basements still.
Look, I have my wife's IBM system that was an 8088. Way back in the day.
It's not the same. That's the 8088, not the 8086.
Right. But I used to, when she bought that system, I remember how much she paid for it. I'm like, why did you pay that much money for that machine? I'm like, I built this whole system with all this RAM and disk at the time. Oh, I can't even remember the specs. And I kept this IBM box in my attic for so long. My wife's machine was an IBM 8088. And I'm like, and then I eventually just got rid of it. But I'm like, I'd like those days back, right? Those days back of being able to build your own systems, to put your own software on.
You can still do it. You can still do it.
It's called Newegg.
Yeah. And System 76. Right. All right, Paul, you're up.
It's interesting. Like most New England families, I lived in the Cape, and
fucking lived in the Cape.
Oh, the Cape.
Not
okay.
I
thought he said a cave.
I didn't wear a cape. We lived in the Cape.
I wear a cape. Lived in the Cape. No cape.
Not all heroes live in the Cape.
Let me clarify. A cape, which is a style of house, not the cape, which is Cape Cod.
Thank you.
So many different directions. It was confusing.
Yeah, it fucking exploded.
I thought maybe it was a cape that
like
you wore.
Ed Scotus was saying, there is a story here, in a story arc.
Okay.
Basically, that put my bedroom on the first floor once we got older, and my sister and I needed to have separate bedrooms. And on Christmas Eve,
socks
again. Before it got awkward, Larry, I was put on the first floor of the house in my own bedroom.
You went first.
And on Christmas Eve, at probably like
you were on the bottom?
4 o'clock in the morning.
And she was developing body parts, wasn't she?
Well, there's a
again.
Wow.
It got awkward. I was in my own bedroom on the first floor on Christmas Eve.
Everything
at 4 o'clock in the morning.
All the presents were wrapped on the tree. On the floor that
the children were all nestled in bed.
Everyone else was on the second floor, and so 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, I wonder what I got for Christmas. I'm like, I don't have to sleep, and like, I can go steal a Christmas present, bring it into my bedroom, and open it up and see what it is. And I did that, and it was this really interesting looking piece of electronics. It was rectangular in shape. It had these chips that were all soldered on it.
And it was a Borg cube, wasn't it?
No.
A fleshlight?
This escalated quickly.
Just push through, Paul.
Hold on, Jeff. Hold on. If your flashlight is rectangular shaped with chips soldered on it, like, can you send me a link?
It was not me. It was Thompson.
That's ML AI chipset.
Keep
what
going.
that was it was RAM from my Apple IIe, right? That my parents had bought me. So I had taken classes. My parents had bought me a computer, but what I had unwrapped before they had shown me actually what I got, because it was just the RAM, was an Apple IIe computer. That's the computer that I wish that I had. I was the cool kid on the block. I had 2 disk drives, right?
Oh man, you were badass if you had 2 drives.
Disk drives.
You had a pair.
I played
and then some.
Spy Hunter on my Apple IIe, which was awesome because a few months ago into the arcade in Providence and had the Spy Hunter, like you sit in an arcade game playing Spy Hunter, which was really cool. And so that was my first kind of introduction to computing, was writing basic programs on an Apple IIe. And what was interesting, though, is that I got interested in not computers but girls.
Yes.
And then kind of rekindled.
Fucking love girls.
Right?
They're awesome.
So let's go around again and everybody talk about their favorite girl.
No.
The one you wish you still
We'll be here till midnight.
This is a bad idea.
We'll save that for after the show, but
I made long distance calls to a girl too.
Just
saying.
Like so, but in high school, I was taking basic, kind of getting back to my roots, and I'm like, this is really cool. Like, I remember all this stuff from all the stuff I did in Apple IIe, and my math scores. The story goes, my math scores were horrible, like horrible, and the vice principal was like, look, I'm like, I want to take the Pascal course, to your point, and they're like, that's the advanced programming class, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I want to take that. And he's like, but your math scores really suck. And I'm like, well, computers do math for you, right? And he's like, yeah, that's cool and all, but you got to get an A in basic to be able to take Pascal. So I got an A in basic, and I took Pascal, and I also got an A. And I'm like, computers could be like a cool kind of thing for me.
So math and computers, the one thing Sean Malloy taught me a long time ago was when you solve problems in N, it's way better than 1 to the n.
Right?
Yes. But you got to understand
I can tell
the
it how to
algorithms.
do
math.
Yes,
Exactly.
As long as I know how to do math, I don't have to do math.
Right.
The computer does it for me.
Yes.
And that's what I learned in writing BASIC and in Pascal in high school. And I'm like, I'm kind of onto something. And then, again, I got interested in girls and like paintball and stuff in college.
Girls and paintball.
Girls and paintball. Like, I kind of went back to that, right?
How does that correlate?
But then because it was a tangent that I went off on, right? And didn't do too well in my. Hopefully, my kids aren't listening. But I didn't do too well in my first year of college, right? And then I'm like,
you didn't do too well on the girls or the
paintball, right?
very true. All of them.
You have to specialize. You need to pick
And I'm
one.
like, hold up, but like one thing.
You distributed your skill set in college, and you sucked at all of them.
But I'm like, one thing I'm pretty good at is computers. So I'm
And
like,
there's porn on computers. So there's girls and
there's
paintball.
like
on
girls
computers.
and computers, like there's an intersection there with porn, which is great. And I'm like, this is awesome. So I'm like, I want to go back to computers. And then my first job interview in college, when I was like, yeah, probably paintball and girls I'm not too good at, so let's do computers, right? And my first job interview, it all culminated back to who would be my boss at the time, right? Was like, you need to show me how to program, and like whiteboarded out problems and like show me how you'd write the code to do that. And I'm like, yeah. I remember like in between girls and paintball, I remember some coding stuff. Here's some basic code on how to do that. And he's like, close enough. Like, you got the job, right? And then I was the essentially programmer and also the bub, which was short for backup boy. So
Backup boy.
I would write code.
That sounds like a T-shirt.
Right?
Show me where I touched you.
I was the person
I'm
who
your bub.
I would write code, and the senior programmers would laugh at me and show me how to write code the right way. And my other job was every programmer's workstation had a physical backup drive, and a lot of the knobs on the drives that like lock the tape into the drive, right? Not those kind of knobs, Larry. And on the backup drive was broken off, so there was a vice grip that you would have to lock the tape in, and make a backup of all of the computers that were the developers running code to back up their code. And that was my first job. So when you talk about starting at the bottom, I don't know that there's any other job in computers today
backup boy
that embodies like the bottom of the totem pole other than backup boy.
I used to crawl.
So you want the paintball gun and girls back? Is that what you said?
To pull
That's what I got out of that.
Physically fuse fiber connections way back.
But
Paul,
you know what, Matt? Crawl under a programmer's desk.
Is that so?
IG's not top of the totem.
I like how we just sure this is programming anymore. Which is really where backup boy comes from.
So Paul,
do you want your Apple?
Is this hard drives?
Is that
hold on. So wait, I want my Apple IIe back, but I'm also very thankful. The folks that I worked with, it was a point of sale retailer, right? When I would write code, they would be so patient with me and show me. And I remember Joseph and Edgar, right? I remember vividly. I would show them my code, and then would take the time to show me like ways to improve that, ways to do sorts, ways to comment my code, all of the fundamentals of hacking and software engineering, right? And it was just a huge opportunity, and that's really where I got my start.
Now, question, Paul.
Vice grips.
No, not vice grips.
You're under a programmer's desk with a pair of vice grips.
If you got two, you
and a paintball gun and a girl.
Is backup boy like piss boy at a Jimmy Buffett concert?
Yes.
You hold the bucket and somebody pees in it and they throw the quarter in when you're done.
Fortunately not.
Okay.
Because all the programmers would go home and I'd have to stay there.
So Paul, you reminded me of a story. When I was in high school, at this time of year, one of the things that the computer teacher would do is say, we had a Christmas tree printing contest. Remember, we were on the KSR 33 terminals, hard copy output.
I don't remember.
The thing was to make the fanciest. Okay, well, they are a little old school.
Some of us
fanciest
Tyler,
Christmas tree.
Tyler wasn't even a twinkle in his dad's eye at that point.
Fanciest tree, not even a shortest code, and I was getting my code pretty damn short, and this is in BASIC, until one of the guys went and took a math class over the summer, and he actually had the algorithm for the slope of the tree and so he had a little tiny math program, and he could do the invert, and he made this beautiful tree with random ornaments on it. That's multiple pages.
To point, like my parents were probably like smoking weed and like buying records in the record store at that time.
My aunt and uncle were doing that, but yeah.
But that's what got me hooked to the Commodore 128. I was doing like
weed
architecture design.
Weed records.
Weed and Led Zeppelin albums.
He does live in Colorado.
I do. 420.
Take it home.
At First State in the Union, by the way. But what hooked me to the 128 was the ability to do design graphics and the ability to create these
fake IDs,
architecture, design, etc. No, not a. Yeah, I did do some fake
the
IDs,
girls, because like
that was high school. Yeah.
Programming really didn't help.
That was
to get
hacking.
The girls
Hacking the license.
Oh, it
Not the right
because
girl.
you gave them the fake IDs.
Oh no, they were the right girls.
They were the right
a
girls
lot in high school, but I wasn't there yet in junior high. But
Oh no, they were the right girls because any girls were appreciated. I think.
Hey,
well,
when
that's true.
girls drop envelopes into your locker saying, "Here's cash and give me all the things you want," I knew where every party was in the
As opposed to
entire
talking
city.
to
That's a gigolo.
See,
Yes, I was.
see in high
That's
school.
how I made my money in high
Were
school.
you in Nevada? Dropped the source code like Doug was saying from his professors in your locker. That was hot.
So to
hacker culture.
But I was
to bring this back to hacker.
Are you still
holiday
wanting
hack
this
challenge.
thing to go?
No, I think I'm done. Yeah.
All right, we can wrap.
I think we should
Wrap it up.
Wrap
Take
it
it
up.
to the
I
break.
think we should wrap.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching
Longest segment
Paul Security
ever.
Weekly. And this segment, it was a journey that I'm glad we took for the benefit of not
Mr.
just
Kite.
all of us, right, but of our listeners as well. I think we did a great job defining hacker culture and our various backgrounds, which was a hilarious exercise. Thank you, everyone, and that will conclude this episode and segment of Paul Security Weekly.
Over and
The marathon has ended.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
We didn't even get into movies and TV shows.
Bill dropped The Matrix.
Okay, Bob.
New.
Oh my god, I gotta pee.